All right, welcome back to Don't Think, Just Charge. I'm Dave, he's Harvey, and today we're going to be giving you some list building tips in OnePageRules. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to all of you joining us on YouTube and Spotify. We're going to go through some of the things that we do when we're thinking about list building and just share our thoughts with you. Have a little bit of a blab about really our process. And then we're going to do something a little bit new this week. So for those of you who are in our Discord, you know what's coming up. I sent out a message to the Discord saying anyone who has a question that they want us to pick up on when we're discussing this list building in general, pop it into the Discord, made a little thread, and everyone sent a load of questions in. Does that sound like the sort of thing that you want to get involved with? Join us in the Discord. It's completely free. Just click on the link down below. And whilst you're down there, follow us on Spotify, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Please give us the thumbs up. Drop us a comment. It really, really helps boost the channel. So what we're going to do is go through the points that we've kind of had a little bit of a pre-discussion about, and kind of just discuss our general thoughts on it, and then we'll go over to the Q&A afterwards and pick up on the questions that you wonderful people have sent in.
Hey guys, Editor Harvey here. This video originally started off in our minds as a much kind of shorter tips and tricks style video, but when we sat down to record, we decided actually a discussion was more in line with what we wanted. So for those of you who are here just for the tips and tricks, I will be putting them on the screen right now. You should be able to see them. What follows is the discussion around these tips and tricks. It does loosely follow it, and it definitely has a lot more information in it if you are interested. There'll be timestamps below to kind of roughly where we talk about each of these ideas. And at the very end, obviously, there is still a Q&A with questions submitted by our community, so that's worth sticking around for. But yes, for those of you who are just here for the tips, then you can read the screen now and then skip along if you want to see further discussions, but you don't need to do that if you don't want to. Enjoy the rest of the video. I'll catch you guys soon.
All right, let's get started. So the kind of two approaches that we think we're going to start with is considering the game mode. We'll go from there to the next step. Now, these first two steps actually are kind of interchangeable, but we'll focus on the game mode first. So I'm presuming that we're presuming you're going to be playing the main battle game, but this can apply to skirmish, of course. And really, it's a case about thinking, what kind of game are you playing? Are you going to be playing base OPR, and by that we mean the game as it's presented in the beginner's guide in the core rulebook, where it's end of game scoring, D3+1 objectives, that style of game? Or are you preparing for an event? Are you going to be doing something where you're not necessarily playing that all day long? You're not playing the exact same game mode. Maybe you're using the tournament pack. We've spent some time talking about that on the channel. We'll be continuing that series soon. But when you're approaching it from that sort of angle, you need to be prepared for wacky scenarios, pick and carry sorts of missions, get out of different deployment zones, but then also the variant on scoring, which is quite often progressive, where you score points for objectives controlled at the end of each round. Now, in particular, progressive is something that I'm going to be talking about a lot more when thinking about that pack structure, because that changes the weighting of emphasis of the value of certain special rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on the topic of event pack versus normal or whatever, obviously it's very hard to give general tips on event packs because they change so drastically depending on where you're playing and who's designed the event pack and so on. But what I will say is basically all OPR games demand a certain level of mobility.
Yeah.
And I think when you're building a list, you have to make sure you have some aspect of that. Now, if your game mode involves progressive scoring, if your event pack involves progressive scoring or non-traditional deployment zones, beyond the normal OPR kind of like 24 inches apart thing, then I would say that, obviously Scout is a big contender for the best source of mobility in the game. I think if you're running just base OPR, then you can consider Scout or Ambush for mobility. Or in some cases, just, fast strider units that you can stick on the flanks and such. But I think obviously when you're considering event packs, if you are playing progressive or if you are playing, across the day, maybe you've got 2 progressive, 2 normal, then our recommendation is basically always scout. Make sure you're bringing some source of, there's also transports as well as another source of mobility. Just make sure you're bringing some source of mobility in your armies, whether it be base or event pack. Event pack tends to favor a lot more mobility. But yeah, my first tip is, when you hit the end of your list building section, go like, do I have mobility here? And can I challenge opponent mobility, right? Like if I'm playing an all melee army with 12-inch charges, am I going to be able to win a mobility game here? Because if the answer is no, then you're probably better off adding some pieces in that can help either counter mobility, like spellcasting, which lets you move 12 and then cast 12. Shooting, obviously a very great one. Or just your own pieces of mobility. All these are good options. Sometimes even just having big, aggressive, tough things as well can counter mobility, because you just kind of like push them onto the point and say, right, charge me now. But make sure you're including that in your pack, definitely. In your army, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different points to kind of add to build onto that as well. And we can't say and stress this enough that mobility is so crucial to OPR. One of the things actually you'll hear us talking about and some other people is that OPR can become chess-like. For any of you who watched our recent video where we did scenario 2 in the 25-26 tournament pack, you made a comment towards the end of that video, which is in round 2, of saying, there's no need to roll any more dice. You can resolve this entire game with movement alone. And that in itself is quite a high-level skill, the ability to analyze when you're at that stage of the game of going, I don't need to think about dice now. I can just I can resolve it with movement. Yep. But dialing it back to exactly that core point, movement is key. I'm going to actually pick up on something, because early days in OPR, you thought that slow was one of the best rules on a unit. Do you still think that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of units in OPR keep, they're very simple rolls, move forwards, die. And Scout gives you a great discount on that, right?
Slow
gives you a great discount on that. I think the important thing is kind of what I said, right? Like, you don't need to have your own ability if you can challenge your opponent's ability. But you should always bring some ability anyway, right? The dwarves are the classic example of like, they need some sort of way of being mobile. And you tend to have ambush on dwarf lists to solve that problem. It's why dwarves always suffer in progressive, because their units are slow, so they can't get to the points, and then their ambushes can't contest for 2 rounds. So I still think slow is a really, really great rule. It's really, really useful for the point cost reduction, and you do just get a whole lot of stats as a result of it.
Yeah.
But it's a huge list building consideration, right? You can't just like jam a full slow army, no ambush, no scout, and expect to be able to outplay your opponent in situations where perhaps maybe they won the objective roll off and they put down 2 of the objectives and they put them really, really far apart. Or they put them like quite deep down. So you have to triple move some of your units to get there. So definitely one to consider really when it comes to building an army with slow in it. And it's no surprise really that we tend to see those armies performing worse in event packs.
Yeah.
Because they're so much more stretched from ability, where other armies can just have a whole mobile army, right? You could have a full scout army if you play HDF or whatever. You compare that to a dwarves who might bring 1 unit of miners or some rangers who are going to get blown off the board. It's not really too shocking now.
Yeah, you do see a bit more of a skew away from those armies, I think, in those tournament packs. Yeah. But in the base game, Dwarf guilds still very, very good. Dwarves in fantasy, I think, still very good. Havoc dwarves as well in the base game, very scary. But they are the sort of army that can suffer when, especially in progressive, when you're making a rush for round 1 objectives. Because unless you're using twists and gambits, I think, from the advanced rule book, when you get ahead, you often stay ahead. Catch-up mechanics aren't really contributed into the design of tournament packs. And so it makes a huge difference. And on that point, things like the night transport and the robot legions are so important and so powerful. The ability to have an aircraft transport that drops a capping unit on an objective in round 1 can really swing the game.
Yeah, I think focusing on mobility is probably the number one thing you want to look at when you're looking at your list. If you're missing out on mobility, then you're going to suffer. I think that's probably second only to number of activations, which actually plays directly into mobility as a concept, really.
Yeah.
I think, when we talk about, having a solved game state like that, oftentimes it involves a number of activations as well as mobility, right? And what you're trying to do in OPR is you're trying to reach that state, right? There are a couple of ways of doing it. You can wipe enough things off the enemy's board so that they literally can't move on to the objectives and they're stuck like that. Or you can just have more things around that can then like do decapping and stuff, right? So you won't win in such a stompy way, but you'll win in a slightly more kind of tactical, dipping in and out of difficult terrain, line of sight, that kind of stuff way. Number of activations also massively helps with being able to delay your decisions, which is quite a nice thing. I think in general, you want, a healthy number of activations. We always recommend 7 at 2,000 points. That's for 2 reasons. One, because if you run 4, you might occasionally just come across 5 objectives, and that's really difficult to you're gonna have to like haul, a quarter of your army over to one objective, and they have to stand there for 1 turn, and your opponent can, delay your activations so they get good charges on you and stuff. But the other thing is, there's just like you need to have enough moving pieces to contest objectives anyway, right? Like sometimes you just need 7 things, right? You just need 1 thing that sticks around on the left-hand flank and does stuff. And if you over-invest into certain units, which is where kind of activation count comes into it, then you'll find oftentimes your opponents have really good ways of neutralizing them. Like OPR is a pretty deadly game, so if you have 5 activations, they could potentially wipe out a fifth of your army in 1 charge.
Yeah.
And they could do that, across the board, right? No problem, because they can redistribute their resources a bit easier than you can, right? Like if you only have 5 resources, you can at most go like, okay, 20% here, 40% here, 40% here, or whatever. Or you can move a 20% over to another 20%. Obviously, that doesn't really account for point values, but it matters just activation count. So it's also really nice to just have more of those so you can more evenly go, okay, I'm going to put some over here, some over there. I'm going to put something small down here and let them do their deployment first and see where they're committing their big stuff. And then I commit my small stuff, and then I can see how the game's going to go. Yeah. Which in itself actually ties back to mobility once again, right? If you have a very, very immobile army and you're forced to deploy all your stuff, then your opponent can use the deployment as a source of mobility to out-mobilize you and control the board. So as I think as a general rule, we always say 7 activations. I think that's a pretty fair point, right? I think if you're hitting mobility and you're hitting 7 activations, you're basically 90% of the way there, I think, right? Yeah. There's a couple of extra considerations you need to go from there. But if you're taking away 2 things from this video, it's make sure you have a source of mobility and make sure you have 7 activations at 2,000 points. We discussed just before this, that does scale up to 3,000, but it's less harsh.
It is less harsh, yes.
Yeah. A thing to consider about activations is what style of activation you've got as well. If you've got an all melee unit, you know that most of the time melee units in round 1 aren't doing anything. So they have 3 activations to get their value. And most melee units, basically all melee in general can only affect 1 unit at a time. So if you have like 5 activations all melee, you basically have 15 things you can do in the game to try and kill your opponent. Right now, if they have 7 activations, you don't need to kill everything on the enemy's board, but that means you need some pretty good value out of your activations there to wipe out all their 7 units across 15 things. And that's assuming you get 15 good, which you basically never do.
Yeah. So like the first and the fourth activations for melee units are so often just movements rather than a charge and actually dealing damage. So it actually breaks down to be less than that. I don't want to say it's exactly 2 activations for a melee unit because you can charge onto a point, but it is relevant. And exactly that actually on that point of how are your units moving, which I think is kind of an important part of what you're talking about there. So melee into combat, for example, is tying back into that activations point. What are your units doing within their movement? Now that sounds a little bit glib, and what I mean is, are they taking points or are they killing something? And sometimes they're doing both. And I kind of want to, if we were smarter, we'd have actually done this as headlines: activations, movement, and I want to bring in the third point, which is options. And I think that in 2 senses, options in OPR are so powerful. 1, your options on the board as to what you're going to do, and 2, your options in unit upgrades. Now, we're going to talk about unit upgrades and special rules in a bit, but activation options on the board. If I have 5 objectives in a game and I have 5 units in progressive, I need to be on those points. So my units probably aren't outputting as effectively and as lethally as I want them to. But if I have 7 activations, 2 of them are swarms and 5 of them are powerful punching units, The swarms are doing the objective game. And remember, it's the objectives that win you games. The other 5 are doing the killy thing, which stops your opponent from getting objectives. And one tough 1 guy holds objectives as well as one tough 24 guy. And this is why Undead was so powerful, so it's a good thing that's gone. But it's that aspect of, if you want to win a game, have a think about how your dudes are doing it. And if you've got 5 activations, you don't have the options. So more activations there are good. And then if you have 10 activations and they're all slow, no transport, no ambush, no fast, no scout, your options are again being reduced. So make sure you're thinking about that. Are you hard locking or soft locking yourself into a board state where you don't have a choice? And in fact, I made this comment a few weeks ago when we played round 1. I played Titan Lords. I didn't feel like I had meaningful in-game decisions to make. I had optimum decisions and game losing decisions, and I don't think I had much room in between. No. And I didn't enjoy that personally. I just felt like I'd lost a bit of agency in the game. So
I think you're bob on there. Really, the thing that activations really gives you is the ability to play all objectives, right? Which is kind of huge, right? Like you said it then when you were talking about progressive, right? You need to test 5 objectives. Don't let your strategy ever be, I'm not going to go for an objective. Because of how powerful, because everything can contest, right? Sometimes you might look at an objective and go like, oh, well, they put 1,000 points over there. I'm not going to win that one anyway. I just won't bother, right? But if you've built a good list, i.e. a list that has a variety of units and throwaway activations like swarms or, chaff or whatever you're going to do, it's always worth going over there and just causing a little bit of trouble. Because if you can decap, then their 1,000 points has to stick around and then try again next turn. And you can steal activations from your opponents like that. So I suppose that, I guess, was a kind of tied alongside bring lots of activations. It's also bring a variety of units and bring units you don't care about, right? If you reach the end of the list and you realize that your list is, you've got like 4 big guys, or be more fair. Okay, we've got 6 different units, right? But they're all relatively expensive. Then you might find that you're actually going to struggle to get the value out of all of them because one of them has to be activated last. Yeah, and the one that gets activated last is going to get the worst activation. So we've actually mentioned this before in our videos, but activation priority is a thing we mentioned in our activation video, but it also comes into list building as well. You see it all the time when people have ambushes, they have a really, really clear concept of this, right? They go like, this ambush unit, which costs 400 points, is going to ambush in. I'm going to activate it first. I'm going to kill their big thing, right? When people write out their like strategies for their games, they always say like, these guys go on the flanks and these guys do a big threats and stuff like that. But another thing to consider is what order are you doing all those things in, right? Because if let's say you run 3 big ambush units, it's going to be really hard to get all 3 of those ambush units to do their full thing. Like 2 ambush units actually is an even better example, right? Because you put one down, put the other one down, they charge one, you charge with the other one, right? And you've not really made a lot of ground there. So have a real consideration about like, okay, if I was just like, straight line battle, what am I activating first? How am I activating it? Because what you don't want to be is super strained, right? Because OPR is such a deadly game, you can't afford to have lots of points sat there on the board, 4 activations into a round, because you want to be using it to its full effectiveness.
Yeah. And that does all come down into activation priority. For more information on that, go see our activation priority video. We cover that one in some detail. Cool. So we have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole away from the 2 separate points there of being either the base game or a tournament pack, but these are all still relevant points that feed into those decisions at the start and that kind of consideration that you have. If you know your tournament pack, for example, and you know that your tournament pack is all 3 objectives, all 3 objective base game, then perhaps at that situation, actually those 5 and 6 activation armies are feeling a little bit better. But I'm yet to see that tournament pack.
No. Give me 4 objectives or give me death. That's all I want.
Harvey's firm belief is that 4 activations is the best way of playing base OPR, and he will not be persuaded any other way. Brill, so the next thing to kind of think about then we've covered some generalist points of thinking about what game modes you're doing, is there a tournament pack, and your activations, and the range of impacts of activations that you're going to get. Another point to consider then really is what style of list are you going for? And the two big ones that I've thought about here are competitive, which many of you listening are here for, and you're here for the competitive tips. Hello, you are welcome here. But there's going to be at least a few of you, I hope, who are thinking, screw all of that. That's nice, thanks. I'm here for the theme. I'm here for my all elementals high elf fleets. Sven, call out to you, pal, I see you. Because it's fucking rad. It's for the people who are here for the all Gecko Saurians. Those sorts of decisions obviously matter because it all feeds back to, are you going to enjoy the game? And is your opponent going to enjoy the game? Like, there's that kind of balance of, I could bring, I'm going to do a little bit of a tip of a hat here to something which we can talk about later. If you want to know what it is, join the Discord. You could bring in 1,000 points for Human Inquisition Assassins. That's a theme that you could do. And again, perform surprisingly well if you are surprised by that one, as I encountered quite recently. They are important decisions to make, partly because they'll impact on how well you do. And you should be thinking about, if you're trying to do both, if you're trying to do well and a theme, try and consider this holistic approach of thinking about what games you're playing. But really, most importantly, the point I want to make is it's how you enjoy the game. And if you're going to do something and then hate every minute of it, don't do it. That's the headline there.
Yeah, I think for like a competitive list, right? I think there are some things you definitely want to hit. If we're talking 3.5, then you want to hit some amount of deadly. You want to hit AP4, right? AP4, AP3 at the very least. If you don't have any, I would always go through my units and I would always look at what the AP sources are, right? If you've got AP1 all the way down the list, you need to pull something and switch it around, right? I would always go for at least 2 units in your army. If you're looking for just like general rules, 2 units have AP sources, right? And I'm talking AP4 basically exclusively from that. You need a way of killing def 2 things, and if you don't have that in your army, which AP4 is by far the best way of doing, then you need to then go back to the drawing board with that. Most armies have a way of doing that. Some armies right now might struggle a little bit more. Like I know goblins have had a lot of their stuff taken away from them, but most armies have a way of doing it. So absolutely, from a competitive side, bring AP. If you're looking further into competitive, then you go back to things we've mentioned. Bring your mobility, bring your activations, and you're good to go there. Now, obviously, the first thing I do when I'm actually building a list is go through the army book and try and identify these sources, right? The first thing I do when I go through an army book is like, right, where's my AP? Scroll, click. Okay, that's my AP. I'll put that in first. Then I go like, okay, well, where do I get my cheap activations from? Okay, add a couple of those, right? And you can always fine tune after. Where do I get my deadly from? Grab some of that. And then basically you're in the list building stage at that point, right? Once you've met the basic requirements of like some AP and some chaff, you're ready to go. Now, obviously, if you're building a SKU list or a themed list or whatever, you don't have those options, which can obviously make it a lot more difficult. You basically constrain yourself to a small portion of a book, really, when you do a themed list. Now, there are 2 ways around this. One is obviously hero auras can be quite flexible. Hero auras and spellcasting are a good way of getting some flexibility into an army that you might not normally have. The other thing you can do is actually there's 3 ways, I guess. The other thing you can do is just make the best of a bad bunch kind of thing. Identify what your best source of AP is also, and just desperately try and cram as much of that in as well, right? Like if you're doing like you say, the all elementals list, right? You might be like, okay, well, actually, my big walkers are my best chance here. So instead of filling my army with just like elemental protectors and elemental, whatever they're called, strikers or something, instead of filling my army with just the tough 3 guys, I'm going to go like, actually, I'm going to bring a couple of tough 12 guys who actually have access to some decent AP or whatever, and I'm going to push them forwards at the board. So even when you're doing theme lists, you have lots of options, like the classic all troll list, right? Where you can bring a bunch of trolls with troll bosses in it, or you can bring troll giants or something. And you might go like, well, actually the troll giants don't punch that hard. So maybe I do need to focus more on trolls with troll leaders in it or something. So just make sure that you can stick to your theme and you can also get the results you want. The third way of dealing with that in a theme list is this is the mini agnostic game. So if you want to run a troll list and you're going, I don't have any decent sources of AP, print off some mini trolls and just pick the unit with AP and stick them in there and go for it, right? It's not really a list building tip as such. It's more of like a philosophy thing, but like, be flexible with yourself, right? Like if you're there for the cool theme, then you're probably there for the cool minis, is most of the time, is the truth.
You stole my point. Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah. Give yourself the flexibility to do that for sure.
Yeah. I kind of want to. So I was going to make that. I was going to say that. So he stole my answer. I really want to. This here, what I'm about to do is an appeal to people who've come from miniature fixed games like chess and Warhammer. They have identifiable things that attach to them. Warhammer way more than chess, I know, but I want to make sure it's something else. Mantic games have this a lot as well. Embrace OPR's mini agnosticism. Yep. Go and find a range. Go on my mini factory, or go on any other mini website that isn't your game's website, and just think, hey, that's kind of cool. What can I do to reverse jam it into my list? So, like, I've talked about sharks. There's a range of shark minis. I can't even remember the name of the creator. I just backed it. I've got the STLs and I'm slowly printing them off and painting them up. They are literally just little cartoony sharks. And I am constantly thinking about how I can make them an OPR army. I am shoving it in to make it work. And the enjoyment I'm getting from it is phenomenal. Harvey and I spoke today about Custodian Brothers. I am a keen fan of them. I'm picking up the Diverging Realm minis at the moment, and I'm printing some of those off. I don't need to. I've got a shit ton of Games Workshop proxies for them. But then we were moving on to the conversation about what minis you have, Harvey, that you could use as custodians, and that was fucking fun.
Yeah.
Embrace it. Go find something that is outside of your perception of what your minis should be and try it, and you'll unlock so much fun that'll let you go over into the thematic point.
Yeah. I suppose the next best thing to talk about on the topic of list building, right? So we've kind of covered like a general list principle. We've covered like, okay, if you think about what you're building it for, right? What you need for the certain thing. If you're building base OPR, then 7 activations seems really good. If you're going for a pack and the pack's all five objectives, then maybe a few more or whatever. If the pack demands a hero, then maybe you need that. We've kind of talked about, okay, well, specifically what kind of list, what style of list you're trying to build as well, right? So aside from what I'm trying to achieve, I want to look at like, okay, am I trying to just playing to win? Am I playing for cool combos or whatever? Am I playing because I want my theme? Which is all very good. But I guess the next thing to do is like, okay, well, what do you actually look at when you look at a book? And how do you find the units that are good in there, right? This is a thing we see all the time. People love the kind of like army book reviews because they find it quite hard to analyze units and determine if they're good or bad, basically. Now, I would say, first of all, some of this is just intuition, right? Sometimes you look at a unit and go like, yeah, I like that a lot, right? But a lot of it is, to be honest, just like keyword recognition, right?
Yeah.
I think we often talk about stuff like Shred and we often talk about stuff like Furious as great examples of things you want to find on your units. And I would start with this, right? Identify all the keywords you value, right? So either from your game experience or if you've not ever played before, go find other people's experience, I guess, like us. But if you're looking, just like a really simple rule for things to look out for on models, you're looking for things that increase your damage. And you're looking for things that make your morale better, right? And they're basically the two big stat lines we're looking for, right?
I'm going to give you one more.
If you're about to say defense, I'm going to kill you.
No. Mobility. Back to your point from the start, actually, because I completely agree with those first two. Yeah. But I think then throw 2 words in there, fast and strider, and sometimes flying. Those are the ones. You're about to go into a much more thorough analysis of those points, but I think the mobility one can be added and also summarized quickly, so I will, which is strider and fast and strider. They'll do it. But go back onto your 2 points.
Yeah. So I think if you're looking just for like rules of thumb or whatever, then okay, fearless, right? If you see fearless on a unit, very likely it's going to perform better than you think. Not shaking in this game is absolutely enormous. So because obviously, you shake once, you lose basically a third of your effective turns. You might have wasted a move onto an objective, and you have to sit there for another turn, so it can waste even more than that. So fearless, if you see something with fearless, then you should be very happy to see that. Then you have kind of like damage keywords, right? So you've got furious, you've got shred, and you've got AP,
Surge.
right? So AP 3+, yeah. So surge, furious, anything that calls exploding hits is good. So exploding hits, exploding wounds, and quality, right? It's called quality is the last one, right? If you look at a unit and you see kind of quality 5, but you see some really nice weapons, one of the key things about building like a solid list is actually consistency, right? We're looking for really high consistency. So if you're going to bring lots of quality 5, what you need to accept is oftentimes you're going to need to take multiple units and force them onto one unit, right? You're going to have to like gang up on the enemy units because your consistency is quite low and you're not always going to get that kind of like perfect charge that wipes out your opponent. So the higher the quality, the better, obviously. But what you're really looking for is this unit going to do enough damage to cause the kind of damage I want to my opponent, right? So quality 3 tends to be really good for that because, you know, most units in the game, if they're tough 3, then, you know, 12 attacks. Quality 3 means you're doing 8 hits, potential wounds on average. That's starting to reach really good numbers because depending on your AP, that could be 6 wounds, for example, and that's enough to take out 2 models of a tough 3 unit, right? If you push that up to quality 5, all of a sudden you're only taking out 1 model, and then it's not quite as good because you're going to suffer against, they're not going to take morale checks and so on. So for sure, you want to look at, okay, how aggressive is this unit really? Because the more aggressive the unit is, the absolutely objectively better it is, right? Okay, OPR is a game where if you're a melee unit especially, you want to charge and wipe something out. If you're a ranged unit, you don't want to spend 2 turns shooting something, right? So just pure firepower, pure aggressiveness is always going to be a really, really good unit. Now, me personally, I also then look to low defense, as in like bad defense, because that gives you that kind of point efficiency. Right, so if I have like 3 units because I have def 6 or 1 unit because I've got def 2, I'd rather take the 3 units with def 6 because I have 3 activations there and I can do that ganging up thing like I talked about, and I'm more likely to wipe things out. And if I get lucky, then I wipe things out and I have 2 more to do. But if you overkill in OPR, it's a waste of time. So yeah. So look at the offensiveness of the unit. Look for special keywords, right? So like I mentioned, you know, Furious, Shred, whatever. Look for your battle values as well. It's really important to kind of like have a rough idea what these are. So if your unit is tough 1, then A2 is what you're looking for, right? I personally am not taking an A1 tough 1 unit ever. They're just not effective enough unless it's specifically for the use of just chaff, right? Well, so if I literally just don't care, or deadly
shroom sniffers.
For sure.
Give you shroom sniffers.
Sure, like if utility pieces like that aside, right?
Actually,
A1 is just don't go there, right?
Yeah.
In the tough 3 land, 3 attacks is kind of there as well, right? If you see 3 attacks on a tough 3, then you should be thinking like, right? is that aggressive enough, right? Don't treat that as an aggressive piece,
yeah,
because it's not actually aggressive enough. 4 attacks for tough 3. Now you're talking, okay, that's starting to be an aggressive piece. And then from there on upwards, you're looking really to max battle val, but it starts to get a bit more wishy-washy. So tough 6, you definitely want 8 attacks. Mm-hmm. But then from there on, you can kind of go 1 for 1 because of how tough scales quite nicely, because you're less likely to die on the charge. And because you're starting to reach numbers that are quite high, you're going to do enough damage on most charges anyway. So that extra bit of damage doesn't matter too much. If you think about like tough 3 tough 3s with 4 attacks each has 12 attacks. A tough 12 with 12 attacks is lethal enough, basically.
Yeah.
You're really, really looking to kind of like beat the kind of like get into the 10s basically of hits whenever you're trying to build a unit. So 2 hits per tough 1 does that, no problem. 4 hits per tough 3 does that. Tough 6 and 8 is as close as it's ever going to get, and then from there onwards you're kind of fine.
I think one important snapshot of that bit of analysis of the lethality of units is just to take things back and think about the way units are structured in OPR. You've got your heroes with the varying tough values, but your units come in one of a few fixed constructions. You have 5 units of tough 1, which you can double up to 10. Yep. So that means that 5 and 10 are important values to have in your mind. You have units of 10, of course, which I've discussed, which double up to 20, but 20 is such a huge number that instead you want to shake it, and how do you do that? You half it, so that number 10 comes in again. Yeah. You have units of 3, tough 3, which is 9, and 10 is 1 point greater than 9, so there's some padding there. So that is another way of doing it. You have got units of 3 tough 1 guys as well, but they're under it as well. Then you've got tough 6, as we've discussed, and then you're up into tough 12 plus, and we think they're excellent at the moment because of points value anyway. But if you consider then just on the number, what's it called, the number of instances of a construction of a unit, the vast majority is going to be tough 20 wounds or 10 wounds or less. Now, you are rarely going to hit that 20 wound output on a single unit. So what can you actually do? You can half it and put it to a morale check, and then you're in the 10s, and the 10s will wipe things out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why 3 tough 3s with A3 is 9 attacks. Even in the world where they all hit and they all wound, you're not wiping out a unit.
Yeah, so 6 is basically really a magic number there, right? So because the way saving in OPR works, right, you have a 1 in 6 chance to save an attack. Guaranteed always, right? So if you assume you're taking the most aggressively statted weapons and you do 6 hits to something, on average, if you assume you've capped out their AP, which, you know, if you're picking aggressive units you should be doing, then you're going to do 5 wounds, right? So 5 wounds is enough to kill tough 1, tough 3 it's not enough to shake it, tough 12 it's not enough to shake it, right? So what you want to be looking for units that have the capability to do more than that, right? So that's that kind of 8 mark I was talking about before, right? Quality 3, 12 attacks, right? You're going to hit 8 times. If you cap out your AP, you're probably going to do about 6 wounds. And 6 wounds is enough to kill 2 moles in a tough 3. It's enough to reduce a tough 12 down to half and stuff. So it's such an important break point, that like 6 wounds. And anything beyond that, it does increase your reliability somewhat, but it's kind of less useful, because if everything in your army does on average 6 wounds to everything, then it's 2 attacks to kill basically every unit in the game. So yeah, I'm always looking for aggression in games like this, right? Because it's an activation based game. If you wipe out an enemy's activation, it's a huge strategic advantage. So just go as aggressively statted as you can possible, as you humanely can. I don't know.
Possibly,
and then
can. Yeah,
I don't know. And once you've capped out on as much aggression as possible, then you want to start going, okay, now second highest priority is my morale, right? Okay, if I do survive a charge, I want to not be wiped off the board. So have I got some sort of morale keyword on there? Brilliant. And then that's the kind of like blueprint for a good unit. And then you kind of come into what I was saying before. Okay, now I need to look for some high AP. Okay, so I'll take that kind of like base blueprint, stick high AP on it. Do I find anything in my army that looks like that? Take, deadly. Do I find anything like that? Take mobility, right? Do I have mobile things that do these things? And that's your real kind of quality good units that you want to rely on in an army.
Well, I think
chaff is basically just the thing with the most and cheapest wounds.
Yeah, chaff is an important one to say. Those blocks of 20 are really, really strong for exactly that reason. I think then the point to move on to, which this is now coming into army book analysis, and again, it is a skill that can develop into intuition over time. But once you're at the point of thinking, right, I've identified in my army book the lethality units, I know who my killers are. You then have to think beyond that point of lethality and surviving a charge and thinking, what am I missing? Now, if you're missing lethality, sorry, you are failing at a pretty important hurdle in OPR at that point. And Duchies of Vinci, I think, are one of the biggest points to kind of, one of the armies that I'd say fail that test most of the time. But
no, Rebel Guerrillas.
Rebel Guerrillas. Yeah, fair enough.
Blatant example of an army completely lacking in offensive capability. But yeah. Rebel
Guerrillas, very fair point there. But if you are looking at another army, let's take, I don't know, I'm just going to open Army Forge up and pick a random Vampiric Undead, right? If you're looking at them and thinking, where am I going to find my utility? Where am I going to find? I've ruined it. I've spoiled it. Where am I going to find my my lethality? Dave, please. I'll get there. Look for your utility. Hey, spoilers. Because those are the points where you make up for it. And you make up for it with your utility in a number of ways. Now, I started taunting Harvey about shroom sniffers in the Fantasy Goblins army because we both think that's great. That is a utility that pumps your lethality. if you've got the new marks and buffs and debuffs that have all been brought in with 3.5, I think are a good example. The Custodian Brothers Shred mark is another good one. Saurians have a precision mark. That's something that's going to improve your lethality. Rats have a defense debuff, which is so good. It's also expensive, but it is good. These are all ways of finding coverage for that you were missing before. Yeah. But then those aren't the only ways of doing it, because you've also got things like in Vampiric Undead, for example, to come back to what I'm looking at here. I find that when I'm building a Vampiric Undead list, I am struggling for lethality. I'm finding a lot of AP1, which long-time fans of the channel know that I'll happily build a list with nothing but AP1 and then struggle all event long because I'm an idiot. Harvey's right, AP is good to have. But if you look at that, and you build your Vamps list out and you think, crap, I really like the way this is shaped. I love the minis I've got for it. I think it'll be good in a pack if I'm going to an event. But you know what? I'm going to now correctly analyze I have a problem. And that problem is high defense things. Look for solutions. So Vampiric Undead have got Seduce. This is the one that lets you move someone around if they fail a morale check. And you can layer it with morale debuff in that list as well. And so you might go, you know what, opponent, you're bringing troll giants, which are all qual 4 tough dudes. I don't have the AP to deal with it. I'll just move you away. That's one way of doing it. You've also got then in Mummified Undead and in Plague, Havoc Brothers and Disciples, difficult terrain debuff. These are ways of slowing your opponents down. They're ways of controlling the board other than in lethality. And they are all such strong tools for finding ways through the lethality problem.
Yeah, and kind of one final point on looking for quality units in your list as well. Try and find the units that do the best thing for the role you're looking for. It sounds a bit like obvious, right? But oftentimes, books have like 4 or 5 units that are the best that the book offers for things. So, HDF, you want to wipe out lots of chaff. Sappers are completely unmatched with that, right? Because they have, for 180 points, you can get 6 flamethrowers, right? So as you're scrolling through your list, go like, wow, that's a lot of flamethrowers for a very small amount of points, right? So immediately you're like, okay, well, if I ever have a chaff problem, I can go straight to sappers, right? And then I know immediately that's how I kind of like solve that problem. If you look at like high elves, for example, right? They have a not a mobility problem. They have a survivability problem.
Survivability,
right?
Yeah.
All their units are really, really expensive, really, really low tough values, apart from elementals and walkers, right? So as you're scrolling through the list, you reach the kind of elemental strikers, and you're like, oh, these guys are def 2, quality 3. I think they're fearless, aren't they? Tough 3, yeah. Brilliant, right? That's a unit I can use to kind of like be my line that I will actually survive. So that's super valuable. Same with their walkers, right? And you kind of go into that list and go, like, okay, brilliant, that's that, right? In fact, high elf fleets is a really, really good list to go look at as an example, because all high elf fleets units are really specialized, right? Yeah. So you kind of see there what the game, what a specialized unit for each thing looks like. So you like look at, they've got their kind of flame, they got a classic flamer unit, right? Just flamethrowers, AP1, cool, brilliant, right? They've got Scorchers, they've got their, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like long-range anti-aircraft unit, right? Which is 30 inches, A3, AP2, on vanquishers, yeah. Unstoppable, right? Okay, good. There's my AA unit, and so on, right? As you go down through the list. So what I would do is I'd first of all like go through your list and try and find the most premium source of each thing for your list building. And then I would, and this is a bit more kind of like you've done build a couple of lists, I'd compare them against other lists, right? And go like, okay, how, like if I have this like A8, AP3, unstoppable, quality 3 gun as my anti-aircraft piece. But that guy over there has an A12 version of it, right? Or he has artillery, I can do it, right? So you know where you sit in the pecking orders for dealing with anti-aircraft then, right? And by recognizing what your army's strengths are, right? Like let's say you have lots and lots of like custodians, right? Clear strength, lots of def 2, -1 AP, right? You can then have an idea of, first of all, what the list is probably missing and what you need to fill in the gaps with. So for example, with custodians, lots and lots of really, really bulky units, lots of kind of A3, tough 3 units, so not very aggressively statted. So therefore, low number of attacks, struggles with chaff. What do we do with chaff? Hunter Sisters have flamethrowers. Brilliant. I probably want to include some of those in my list. So I think that's probably like the safest way of building lists, right? Like just go through, get your premium units all assembled and go like, right, which of these are actually shit? And do I actually want to deal with those problems with using that unit, right? Because if your best deadly shooting gun is quality 5, then maybe it's better to just go like, you know what, actually I'm just going to rely on AP.
Yeah.
Or like you say, like spell casting instead, or difficult terrain buffs and stuff like that instead. I think try and find those holes.
There's an important point in your list building process. 2 points actually that you've said. One is know your downfalls. Like know when you've built your list. If let's focus on high elf fleets, because I agree they're a really good list to exemplify this. Say I'm bringing high mobility, aggressive board damage output. So I'm going strikers, I'm going shifters, and let's think what else, maybe some tanks, I don't know. Where am I falling down there? I can't take a hit. That's the answer here. I can't actually engage in long, drawn-out fights with my opponent. So analyze and realize that in your list once you've built it, and then deploy it on the board and think, how do I avoid this? How am I moving intelligently to get through it? So that's kind of one point. The other point that you've picked up on is one of the biggest strengths of OPR as a game system. The whole fucking app is free. Like, you can look at every unit in every army for nothing other than your time. And
OPR.
You know what time? Oh yeah, little plug for Harvey's website there for additional analysis. Go and look at, what's the URL?
OPR.Harvey, spelled like my name without a Y, .dev.
There you go. And that has got a really good everything for letting you look through every unit in a list and filter it by types. If you decided to search for everything with Scout, for example, you can pull that up at the click of a button. Get into just doing that. And again, repeating exactly what Harvey said, just go and build a list with another army. Did you face someone last week who brought Robot Legions and you never looked at it before? Pull it up, have a look, click through, build your own Robot Legions lists. It's a really enjoyable process of doing it, and it will help you improve your analysis and learn the game better. And for those of you who maybe aren't so competitive and that's not your focus, I'd argue that it's actually just also beneficial for helping you lose less, because losing a ton isn't fun either. And it's a game within a game, I think, was another point. I think, did you say this to me, Harvey? Someone else said that playing around and making lists on Army Forge is another game in OPR, and it's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. I think recognizing when your list can't do something, and whether or not it's worth fighting for it is another thing, right? I kind of touched on it there.
Yeah, that, I think.
If your best source of AP is quality 5, let's say we're playing Rebel Guerrillas and we just quality 5 everywhere. At that point, you have to go like, well, actually, I'm not going to win that kind of fight. So I need to think of a different strategy, and this is where books become good or bad, right? If you look at like Dark Elf Raiders, for example, right? They have a bunch of, just like High Elves, they have bunch of really hyper fragile units, and they have transports. And if you look through the list, there isn't really a great way of building them. All their shooting kind of sucks. So all you can really do is stick things in transports and throw them at the board. At that point, you've kind of accepted, right? Well, I'm not going to win a long fight, right? Like that's just not the way this is going to play, right? So I'm going to double down on my aggressiveness, going to double down on my glass cannonness. So I need to build a list that can outmaneuver my opponent, and I need to pick my engagements properly. So then you're building a list for a specific strategy instead, right? So with that in mind, I then might go to the Dark Elf Raiders list and go like, okay, what's their most aggressive 3 units? And I'm going to pick up those guys, right? You might see like Core Henchman and go like, that is an extremely aggressive unit. That can probably wipe out units. It can double activate, so it can kill one unit, kill another unit, right? Super hyper aggressive, but so fragile that I need a way of compensating for that. Now, the way you might consider to do that is, first of all, transports, great. But the other thing is like, okay, if I just out activate my opponent, they literally cannot respond, right? They're just sitting there waiting for me to finish my turn. I'm going to kill their stuff. So when you've identified the kind of holes in your army, then you can start thinking of like, okay, what's my actual strategy for dealing with that? Because I need a strategy for everything. And sometimes the strategy is I just ignore it.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because when you hit the table, you need to have that in your head. You need to go like, I can't kill that walker. So I'm just not even going to try, because if I start putting resources into it, I'm not going to be able to kill it fast enough. It's going to get a bunch of value from being shot at all the time, and I'm going to be ignoring the rest of his army. So just have a really clear picture, once you've built a list, or as you're building a list, of like what you're trying to do on the actual tabletop, right? Like if you're going for a full scout list, then don't accidentally not bring all scout, right? Or if you're going for like, if you want to have one really big ambush unit, make sure you bring some other ambush units to make sure you get that first activation with that ambush unit. Make sure you've got the lower activation count so you can do those kind of strikes. Because the last thing you want to do is spend 500 points on an ambush unit, and your opponent have one less activation than you. You put down your 500 point ambush unit, they put down their 500 point ambush unit, and they kill your 500 point ambush unit, right?
Yeah.
So just make sure you're kind of building these into your list, right? Think of a strategy for your list and stick to it. And it may be a bad strategy, right? But it's just important to kind of double down on your strategies.
Yeah, a bad idea wholly followed is better than a good idea partially followed.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, for anyone who, like playing rugby, for example, a bad call, or any team game, a bad call followed by everyone is 10 times better than a good call followed by 2 people.
Yeah.
And that applies to your strategy on the board. One thing's kind of filtering into that for the people who are building thematically, for example, is to use things like your heroes and the other points in your list to cover those points. So, but that requires a bit of backwards engineering. So Kingdom of Angels, if you're going for an all angels list, you could then find out that, I don't really have the way of dealing with deadly tough 12 guys. Like Harvey said, at that point, ignore them, play the rest of the game, find the points of avoiding it, bring in things like your Ice Phoenix Knights, for example, for Kingdom of Angels, that have got the precision debuff. They've been renamed recently. They used to be just Ice Battle Angels or something. But that's one way of doing it. And get to that backstop, realize your problems, and then go back and find ways through it. And that way through it is either strategy on the board, or it's back into the list to find something in your theme that covers that weakness.
Yeah, I think they were called Frost Angels before. I've got two more points to make about list building, which are relatively minor, but I think are worth talking about.
Go for it.
So one is AOF versus GDF, right? Most of our viewers play GDF, right? GDF is a more popular game. GDF is way more kind of like extreme, right? So on one end you've got like infected colonies, zombie spam, and on the other end you've got like Titan Lords, right? And because of that, right, it's really hard to build a list that can actually deal with those mega skew lists. So with that in mind, a part of GDF is accepting that your list is never going to be quite good enough, right? Like you're never going to be able to deal with everything, right? So sometimes you just have to go like, well, actually, this is a counter. In AOF, I think that's much less likely, right? I think AOF is more of an emphasis on like, if you meet like mobility criteria, you're going to be able to play the game. So if you're building for AOF, then the mobility is the thing that I want you to really focus on. Like, don't worry too much about bringing lots of high AP, because most monsters in AOF don't have that Def 2 mark. There's a lot more chaff, so you can afford to kind of like pull back on it. For GDF, I try and bring an answer for most things, but accept that sometimes you are just going to get Titan Lorded, which is why I think if you're building for GDF, the one thing that cures basically all problems is high AP, high attacks, right? So if you're ever wondering, do I take a deadly and a blast unit, or do I take 2 AP whatever units? Take the 2 AP whatever units, right? Unless you have a real need for the specialization, just take high AP, high attacks, and you'll be able to basically do it whatever you want with most things. It's a kind of real classic of like Alien Highs list building, where you can go like, oh, I'll take AP1 and Rending. Or you can just go like, fuck it, it's like 10 points. I'll just take AP4 and everything. And if it's wasted, it's wasted. Who cares, right? Like, I'm going to charge in, and they're going to be on 6-ups, and I'm going to wipe out units, and I'm going to feel good about it. So in a GDF world, AP really is your kind of your generalist option.
That's probably the best time, I think, to talk about the rule that some people are scratching their heads and going, why haven't they said caster too much yet? Because I completely agree. Grimdark Future, it's fucking hard to have an all-comers list at the moment. It's really difficult. An all-comers list that can deal with every opponent's threat in all the right ways, in the right order, and play the objectives. It's nearly fucking non-existent. We're struggling to find it. Caster is a really good band-aid for all of that, of just that point of, with a good caster list, I'm struggling on mobility. Maybe you've got, like in Vamp Undead, it's in my head at the moment, you've got teleport as a spell there that can pick that up. I'm struggling with lethality. They have a deadly spell. Points like that can really show the strength of caster. And if you are finding that that shortcoming is there for your army, maybe caster's your answer. Maybe that's the utility toolbox that you need. And that's why caster is expensive, because it can just cover all those weak spots. I appreciate that a lot of people will just be bringing caster because it's just good damage output, change demons looking at you. But if you are building your list and you're identifying these weaknesses, find the generic way through. That could be AP2, AP3. It could be caster.
Yeah. Yeah, the final thing I want to touch on as well is a pretty minor point, but I think it is relevant. And I'm going to kind of harken back to our playing MTG in lunchtime times, right? So in school, we used to just all rock up with these, like,
years ago.
forever ago, when me and Dave were in school. Every lunchtime, we'd all play MTG, right? And we were in the kind of age of MTG, which is Magic the Gathering, for anyone who doesn't know. It's just a card game. Where we hadn't done, no one was looking at the meta, right? People were just bringing random shit, right? They'd go on the website where you could search all the cards, they'd find a single cool card, and then they'd buy 59 cards that went with it. And that was basically how you kind of like rocked up. And to get the most out of games like that, right, we had to have an understanding of what we were playing against, right? So, like, you know what everyone else is kind of rocking up with at the same time, right? If someone starts bringing hyper-competitive stuff and starts trashing all your meme decks, then it's not going to work anymore, right? Like, you can no longer build those kind of ridiculous, silly decks and still get the same amount of enjoyment from it if someone's just like stomping you with all their stuff. So local meta is such a big thing, right? Like, if you rock up to a game store and you're normally the kind of guy who doesn't really like to bring AP, just likes to bring loads and loads of goblins, and you rock up and everybody's a custodians player, right? Then it's probably time to make slight adjustments to your list to accommodate for that, right? Like, does anyone actually play with aircraft? If you do play against aircraft, then bring some things to deal with them, right? They can be so obnoxious if you don't. But if no one at your club even owns an aircraft mini, let alone gives a shit about playing one, just don't bring that stuff, right? Like, you don't need to bring like a generalist list, an all-comers list, in a context where there isn't, generalist things happening, right? Like, if you always play against your mate who plays orcs and your other mate who plays Battle Brothers, then don't like craft your list specifically so they can beat infected colonies.
Man, yeah, like. Oh, okay. Well, you're taking it from that perspective. I actually just want to say a general point about like etiquette. There are two big points I'd make about etiquette and OPR. One, know your audience. Like, agree with the people you're playing with. What standard are we going to here? Am I doing competitive tournament prep? Because if I'm coming to do tournament prep and you're coming to play 5 troll giants, we're going to have a wildly different game, and one of us, we're probably both going to be disappointed, because if I just stomp your giants, right, your minis just got shafted, you're not happy, I wasted my time trying to do tournament prep and I just got a casual game, it's not good. Make sure you're on the same playing field, right? If it's just like, oh yeah, let's turn up and roll dice, maybe don't bring your adept contest list. Have that sort of thing in mind. While I'm on the etiquette soapbox, really just an important point of conduct. Respect your opponent's time. Know what you're bringing. If you're bringing something new, read it more than twice before you do. I love bringing new lists. I don't think I've gone to an event and brought the same list twice. I've brought custodians a few times because I'm that kind of guy. But I brought something new, and I made sure that when I'm bringing new things that aren't custodians, for example, I am really making sure I'm well versed in what I'm doing, so that if someone asks me what something does, I can tell them. And if I need to check a nuanced detail, I look at my sheet, but I can tell them generally what's going on. I've diverted. What's the word? I've gone on a tangent. That's what I've done. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
I was basically done with my point, really. But if you're playing OPR with just your mates and you're not expecting them to change their armies anytime soon, don't completely tailor your lists to absolutely destroy them.
That's the other thing I wanted to say. Don't tailor either.
But bring stuff that helps you enjoy the game, right? If someone's playing custodians of your meta, don't forget your AP4, your deadly 3, right? Like, make sure you include some of that. But if literally nobody's running a horde play style, don't feel like you have to, when you're in the list, but you go, oh no, I've missed blast and I need some blast now, and then you rock up every day and it doesn't do anything. I know recently in the Discord, one of our Discord members, Jake, was talking about how they've just switched over to AOF, and I think that they're allowing allying, and everybody's bringing ambushing zombies. Like he said, like literally everyone's just bringing infiltrating zombies and just slapping them in the middle of the board, right? If that's happening, bring some blast, right? Feel free
you're
to
not, you're not
adapt
tailoring
to that, right?
At that point for like a one-on-one game. That's the point of being like, if I don't do this, I'm just going to get screwed by this one strat that everyone's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And then for tournament prep, there's only so much you can do, really, right? You might be in and around your community, you might have a rough idea what people are going to play. In general, just bring something generalist. Just try and hit all the points we've talked about before. Like, don't try and like crack a meta that you don't really know a lot about, right? It's better to just bring something fun and easy and go from there. Hit some of the key points we've been talking about, right? Aggressive units with morale and mobility, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think actually, while we're on this, like, what's coming to mind? When building armies, I do think it's very important to try it. I am a criminal of this. I will so frequently go to an event having just printed and painted the minis and being like, fuck it, I'll do it. But I will try and back myself up there by saying I do play a shit ton on Tabletop Simulator. I do try and I feel like I could pick up most armies quite reasonably because I just play a fuck ton. This is we have a YouTube fucking channel. We do this a lot. That would be like saying to War Boss Fitch, you haven't played something before. I bet you that motherfucker has played everything by this point. Love you. I don't mean to call you a motherfucker, War Boss Fitch. I mean it with love. But it's that sort of aspect of, if you are doing something brand new, try and have done either something similar or that thing before. Make sure you've given it a go. And again, this feeds back into the whole point of, are you going to enjoy yourself? This is a really important outcome of all of this list building shit we're talking about now, right? Am I going to bring 5 unit prime brothers for a 4-game tournament day, and I've not really tried it? And by all means, yeah, rule of cool does come through, but if you just get shit on 4 games long, is that a day that you've enjoyed? And if it is, fucking rock on, dude. Like, power to you. You're the people we need in the community. Losing a lot does suck, though. Make sure you've got an idea of it, of just how your things move and play together, and it will probably yield that you at least have a better time and a more interesting set of games than if you just slap 5 things down and fuck up all day.
Yeah. I think also, like, on that topic as well, I think, like, don't overthink it too much as well, right? Like, try and hit the things we've talked about here. Don't spend hours.
Can we stop calling me out? I've called myself out.
Trying to kind of like crack the perfect list or whatever, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a dice game. It's not going to go your way. But also, just there's a lot of strategy in the game, and if you play like crap, then you're gonna lose, right? So you can't. There's only so much you can do on Army Forge before you have to just go like, right, what I'm going to do actually? Instead of scrolling through Army Forge, I'm going to go to a game store and try and find a game, or I'm going to jump on TTS on the OPR Discord or on our Discord, right, and find some games to play, right? Because the best way of list building is iterative. It's trying the list, right? It's building a first list, giving yourself a head scratch, a couple of days, think about it, throw together some minis on TTS, play against someone, go like, wow, that unit sucks. I really thought that was going to perform well. What a waste of 400 points that was. Refine, readjust, whatever, right? Like, make use of stuff like TTS. Some people use Roll20 and stuff like that, but we're in a world now where you don't need to own the minis to play with the minis, really, because thanks to TTS. So don't print a whole army out before you've given it a go.
Yeah. Well, can we stop calling me out? Because I do all of these things. Yeah, do make sure that really you're optimizing yourself for enjoyment at that point, and then success for those of you who are here for the competitive mindset, because that's the way that your list building will improve as well. I think actually I'm going to make that probably my last headline point. Oh no, let's go for one more thing before I do this last point. If you're going, you've touched on it, if you're going for a skew list, do it. Don't like flub around with it. If you're going for the whole all custodian blocks of 3, def 2 up regen, do it, because it will make your games a little bit easier for you to do. Otherwise, you'll do what I do and just hang a unit of sisters. They'll get wiped out, and suddenly you're on 5 or 6 activations and you're playing down because you don't know what you're doing. I've done it a fucking 100 times. I'm going to do it again in my life. But maybe before I do that, I'll listen to this video and know not to do that.
Yep.
Any more points from you before I have one more big one?
No.
Okay.
Done. We can Q&A.
My last point. Oh, yeah, of course, the Q&A. Duh. My last point is that once you've built a list, you've been to whatever you're doing it for. You've been to your local store for your game with your mate. You've been to your tournament. You've been for your narrative massive event where you've won Best Painted. Come back and do it again. Build the list again. Would you build it in the same way with the experience that you now have? Is it an entire write-off? Is it 50% needs tuning? Quite often I find that actually it's 20-30% of the list needs tuning, but by the time I've changed that, it pushes different levers in the list. That means that I need to tweak them as well. It pushes points up, it pushes points down. I need to cut, I need to spend. That iteration, as Harvey's touched on, is something as well that's really important for just improving at list building and having a better time of it all around.
Cool.
Let's Q&A. So thank you so much to our wonderful community members who responded to the call and gave us some questions to ask live and in person as we go through this. So have you read these? I barely read them.
I've glanced through them. I haven't looked at them. So we're doing it live and raw.
Well, we're doing it live and raw. There are repeats, so you'll hear people have kind of seen this develop and come back and ask more questions. We're going to try and answer them. If we feel like we've answered it in the video, we will probably refer you back to it, just so we're not repeating ourselves too much. But let's go in. Jake gets the gold star. We've mentioned him twice in this video. He responded 7 minutes after posting. Love you, Jake. Jake's first question. How does your list building strategy change when building for competitive versus flavor?
So I think that is something we touched on, I think, already. Competitive, if we're just talking competitive, i.e. winning, then obviously, we touched on what we're looking for. Big picture, but we also touched on what we're looking for in terms of individual units. I think a real focus on those, right? Like if the only thing you're looking for is to win, then you're considering books. You're not really considering the best list within your army at that point, right? Mm-hmm. You're going through, you're finding the most optimized strategy for the kind of list you want to play, right? Don't play a list you don't want to play, and you're going to pick the book that corresponds with that and gets the best units for it. Whereas I think for flavor, as we touched on, if I'm building something for flavor, then all I'm trying to do is basically plug the holes of my sinking ship. I'm trying to find the pieces that are going to make it so it's not a complete stomp. And try and find the places where I'm maybe willing to sacrifice a bit on flavor to allow that to happen. So yeah, I mean that's the kind of major way I think it changes.
Yeah, I'd say that also adding to flavor, back to that point of agree with your opponent or know where you're going. Smash the door down. If you got your back against a wall, break the wall down. Right. If you're struggling with flavor, can you ally something in? It's not something we particularly talk about very much. No. We focus on isolated army books, but your all giants army, you're bringing giant tribes in Age of Fantasy, and you're really struggling to actually make it something that you think's gonna not just lose you all game long. Can you ally in a tough 9 from somewhere else just to kind of make up those activations? And if you are then doing it, how are you thematically flavoring it? Have you got the right minis for it? They're just different ways of approaching the list building process that will bring different results.
We also kind of touched on it before, but if I'm I've got some cool troll minis in my book. Those trolls could be statted like custodians, and I don't really care too much, right? Yeah, I'll go on Army Forge, I'll rename the units, I'd call it Master Troll instead. So yeah, if you're really looking just for flavor, then don't feel limited by the books you're in either. You can take some of the kind of competitive stylings of building a list and you can apply it to your flavorful list, right? If you go I really want to play Rebel Guerrillas, but Rebel Guerrillas suck so much fucking dick, I'm just going to play HGF instead, right? And you just go well, that's fine, right? They're still army guys, and I'm going to take units that fit my style, right? But even if they're not exactly, they don't fucking, they don't have a gorilla in their name, right? It's okay.
Yeah. Cool. Second question. In the current state of the game, what do you think is the minimum number of activations in a list to be viable? We've touched on that. 7's your sweet spot at 2K, Grimdark Future, 1500, Fantasy. 3K, it's a bit more forgiving. 9, 10, 11-ish is a good spot to be. You don't want to be too outnumbered that you can't do your activations effectively. If you want to be viable, just don't be bringing 5 activations at 2K Grimdark Future.
Well, I mean, I would say minimum number of activations, I think it probably is 5.
Oh, yeah.
I think, that is the absolute minimum. I think once you go below 5, then that is officially kind of unviable. But you can definitely make 5 activation lists work. You just need to acknowledge the strengths of a 5 activation list and how you're going to leverage that. The strengths obviously being, first of all, you've got bigger units, right? You're much more likely to have like scarier units. So you need to be bullying a bit more with those units. But the other thing is double activations, right? If you're taking advantage of double activations, which is, I have 5 activations, I'm going to go first in round 2. So if the last activation of my round 1, I move 12 inches towards your guy who's already activated, then my first activation of round 2, I can move the remaining 12 inches, which means actually you've got this enormous threat range. So if you want to be completely minimum number of activations, 5, but you need to then be leveraging that. Same the opposite way, right? What's the maximum number of activation to be viable? Well, it's 10 at 2K, right? Just the maximum. But you need to acknowledge that you've taken some risks there, right? I mean, sometimes you have taken basically no risks, right? Like if you're playing Alien Hive and you brought 3
Alien
leaders,
yeah,
then you've taken 0 risk. You've spent 60 points or whatever it is. But you need to acknowledge, okay, I'm not going to be able to activate twice because I've taken 10 activations. So as long as you build a list around the number of activations you've got and have a strategy in mind, I think you can get away with 5. I think you will feel a little bit sad in some game modes. I think it's much harder for a list with 5 activations to beat a list with 10 activations. And I think a 7 activation list can do 10 pretty easily, right? So the further you kind of get down the scale, the more you're going to struggle with too many.
Yeah. If you're me, you'll bring 6 activations, forget you're not playing more than that, and you'll blunder one. This is actually a really important point. We're human. We make mistakes. Not every move is perfect. And if you blunder a unit and it's gone, obviously, if you blunder it, it's gone. But if you really fuck up with it and you find you're suddenly playing a whole 200-point activation down, it can really affect your game. So just remember that if you're going for low activations. Jake's third question here is, what are some qualities or signals in a unit that you look for that tells you it's an efficient or great, potentially OP unit?
Yeah, I think hyper specialization is basically the kind of one word, if that counts as one word. It's got a hyphen, I guess. Answer to that, right? If you have a 20 block of guys who can get a regen aura, then that's a lot of wounds, right? 30 wounds, a lot to deal with. And if they're really cheap, then that's hyper specialized towards raw number of wounds. It's probably going to be a good unit. If you see quality 3 with the max with A2 or A4 for tough 3 units with a whole heap of AP, maybe Furious, maybe Shred, then that's a hyper specialized unit for doing aggressive stuff. If I'm personally a fan of seeing Def 5 but Qual 3, right? Because you're spending less on your defense, you get more units, right? It fits my playstyle. It might not fit everyone's, but I'm looking for that specifically for me, right? I know what I like in a unit, so I'm looking for things that fit that bill. For Dave, right? Almost guaranteed, if Dave scrolls down a book and he sees the word fast, he's more interested in that unit by about 400%, right?
Yeah.
So it's things like that, right? It's that hyper specialty thing, right? Like, is it super aggressive and it has fast? It's 2 thumbs up, right? Like, brilliant, right? Dave really values tough 3. I really value tough 1. So if Dave sees a tough 3 unit with those things in it, he goes fucking bingo. And if I see tough 1 stuff, I go fucking bingo. So
yeah, if I see tough 3, 4 damage of output, that could be A4 or a deadly 3 and an extra attack, something like that. And then a way of ratcheting the lethality, Surge, Furious, Relentless if I'm shooting, Shred, things like that. Things that multiply your output, then I think it's really good. And yes, you're very right. I fucking think fast is fantastic. Ratman clans, super sleeper right now. High elf fleets, to a certain extent, are as well. And their counterparts in fantasy are very, very good. Okay, moving on. Scott Muck asks, you decide you want to play a new army. How do you know what units are good to start with to make a list without having to print and paint a ton of miniatures? So this does go back into the army book analysis point a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, number one thing here is TTS, right? Try them out. Try before you buy. I think is the best way to avoiding printing and playing. Video painting. The other thing is you don't need to have the minis for the models to play with them. You can
Mini
just take
agnostic.
yeah, I mean, if you're playing in a club, you can just go like, hey, I want to try out orcs, so I'm just going to use my HDF as orcs, right? Like, this guy has a gun. I know he has a gun, but he's actually got swords. Right, here are his stats. You'll find loads of opponents who are very, very happy for you to play like that, right? And they may want the same thing as well. They might be like, oh, I was really thinking of doing Saurian Star Host, right? And I don't have like a big dino. Do you mind if I use this box, right? Yeah, go for it, man. Like, whatever, right? Like, we're just measuring and throwing dice, right? We'll get the minis later.
Yeah.
So from like a practical standpoint, I would do that, really. In terms of what units are good, I think part of what makes a unit good is some of the stuff we mentioned. But part of what makes a unit good is just like how much it aligns with how you like playing. And that really is something you can only get by just playing the game, right? You know, you might play orcs and go like, actually, you know, like I just got rolled by robot legions and I really like the idea of rolling lots of 2-ups. I'm kind of sick and tired of playing my orcs and I really want a durable army. Then that's the good units, right? The good units are your guardians and your eternals and your tri-scorpions or whatever with 3-up defense and stuff like that. They're going to fit the way you want to play the game, basically. So it's a little bit wishy-washy as an answer, but if you want something more concrete, go back and to basically the stuff we were just talking about, what's a good unit. But in terms of like avoiding having to print and paint, I would do those things.
Brilliant. Foy Source has asked us, are there useful ratios that broadly apply to most lists? How are you assessing range/melee, scout/ambush, deadly/blast, etc.? Just trying to think how to answer that, really. So I presume what the point Foy Source is coming from here is having specific roles versus general roles and how you build them into your lists. It kind of depends, I think, is the answer, right? Am I building skew or am I building generalist? If I'm building skew, I'm going for the all melee or the all ranged army. And then from that,
pick left or right, basically.
It is pick left or right. Yeah. But it's like, it is a decision tree, right? So if I'm going down the skew route and I'm building all range, mobility is my friend. So, hello, cat. This is my cat, Joey. He says, hello, everybody watching. Look at him. I'm looking at mobility there. I'm looking at transport units as being a good way of getting through. And then I'm thinking, what do I actually die to here? I probably die to lots of aggressive charges, so I'm finding ways to deal with that. Maybe I'm building all kaiju, and I need to be aware of what's going to happen if I can't clear out chaff. Blast.
Yeah. I think for me, so I think in most cases, if you're in an all melee list, so like let's take Havoc Disciples as an example, right? They have some really, really strong melee units, right? But what they actually also have is pretty decent, just like Havoc Brothers with a shred cannon in them, really nice, like 160 points, whatever it is. I would always try and bring some ranged and some melee in a list, right? I think you can get away with all ranged, like Dow, for example, all ranged, right? And I think you can get away with all melee. For example, you know, if you just go like full orc Zug list with speed feet. But I would always try and bring some element of ranged ability and some element of melee ability. Mostly because melee and range have different roles to somewhat, right? Like melee is really good. If you can shake someone with shooting and then charge it with melee, it's guaranteed gone as long as it's below half wounds, which is a huge amount of like reliability within the game. Yeah. So I'd always bring a mix because range especially is one of those things that stops you from being like counted out the game, right? Like if you've got a range, if you've just bought like one token range unit and it sits in the middle of the board, but it can go left or right the whole time, then your opponent kind of like has to account for that, and it adds a bit of like uncertainty to the game. And they can just, if they're cheap especially, they can just do little bits of wounds here and there, and morale checks is good. And the same for melee, right? Like it's really nice just to have a melee unit you can just push forwards because they're cheap, right? You know, melee and chaff are the same thing, really. You can just push your unit of 20 rats forward and do stuff with it. So I would try and hit both in basically all rounded lists. Melee is obviously more efficient in terms of point costs, but I'd try and hit some element of range, some way of doing stuff far away, right? I think because really range is how you get your options. So it could be caster, it could be a fast unit or very fast unit or whatever, right? Just something that lets you go like, okay, that guy really far over there, I need to do something to him.
Yeah.
For scout and ambush, go on.
On that kind of point of range versus melee, and this does then feed into scout, ambush, and deadly blast. I think the important point is to remember that it's not two sides of a coin. There's actually three. There's ranged, melee, and generalist. Like hybrid, for example, is a big conversation topic and will be smoothed over with the 3.6 patch. But if you have a load of specialist ranged units and no melee units, you're going to struggle. If you have all melee, no range, you're going to struggle on a different axis. So having something in the middle is fine and actually quite good. Walkers, I'm going to pick on the Triceratops. No, the Ankylosaurus from Saurian Starhost is a very good example of a unit that is hybrid and excellent because it can pump out some deadly six shots, but is no slouch in combat. Now that does both. That is a best of both worlds. And then there's also things that maybe don't fit into one of those. And chaff, for example, I know they are melee, but like you're not bringing them for their melee output. So it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be a 60-40 here. It can be a 30, 50, 20 sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
I think so. In terms of like ratios, as the question asks, melee and ranged, I don't think that exists. I think you're much better considering, okay, things that are moving forwards and things that aren't instead. So shotgunners could be an example of something that is a melee style unit. It walks forwards. Or, chaff is an example of something that moves forwards. Your one hero with the anti-ambush aura thing. He's a guy who might sit at the back, right? Yeah. Artillery doesn't really count as range or melee in a way in the kind of context of who's moving forward, who's staying back, right? Because it's never contesting an objective. So immediately you're like, okay. So I would get away from range and melee style thinking, and I'd go towards objectives and non-objective players instead, and then you'll find a probably easier way of find that. And in terms of that, I would try and always bring at least 3 objective players in a list. So that could be anything from chaff to tanks that double move onto the points to ambushers to whatever, right? Just bring 3 things that you're certain can do something with objectives, and then you can fill the rest of your army out. And that's a minimum, really. It's not like a goal.
Is that saying specialist focused objective players?
Things that I wouldn't mind double moving onto a point.
Okay.
Is my view on objective,
as in
right?
And that's all their move.
Yeah, so it could be a caster, right? Casters love doing that kind of stuff. It could just be a swarm that double moves onto a point or whatever, right? In terms of my alarm's going off. In terms of scout and ambush, we'll talk 2,000 points here, right? Let's say we've got 7 activations. The most amount of a unit that someone can bring at 2,000 points is 3, right? So for scout, many lists don't have more than 3 scouts because they normally have like 1 scouting unit. Now you can get full scout lists, whatever. So for scout, it's more of a question of because scouts get deployed separately, you kind of want to, like 3 is a really nice number of scouts to have because if your opponent has brought 3 of their scouting unit, you have the same amount. And it's also like, it's not too much of an investment into scout at that point, right? 3 units is a large portion of your army. It's just under half. And you can apply that to an area where they've deployed less than half their army and have the fight you want to have. So I would say for scout, I would bring, anywhere between 1 and 3 is kind of what I'm looking for. More towards 3. I think if you're going for a scout strategy, then go for 3. It's okay to bring a single scout unit. Stuff like the hound units in the game that might just be 5 hounds with scout and fast. It's okay just to bring one of those and just be like, okay, I'm just going to see where my opponent's deployed and just pop it down the right side. Ambush. Ambush is a different one because it's more about activation count. Because the key thing about ambush is getting that first turn into round 2. So this is more of like a vibe thing. It's more of a buy-in. If you assume most lists are going to run about 7 activations, which if you're just building a list, it's going to be 6 or 7, right? On average, people just end up around 6 or 7. So when you want to get that really strong ambush turn, I would be looking for about 4 activations on the board. If I'm running an ambush play style, just so that I have my 4 activations, so I'm not completely out the first round. I still have things I can do, and then going into the next round, I'm very likely to be going first. It's much harder for ambush. It's a bit more like local meta call, because if you play against a guy who's like Dwarf Guild's all ambush, then bringing a really, really meaty ambush unit is always going to get insta-gibbed.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a meta call there, and maybe there's a bit of like, gentle competition as people get more and more ambush stuff in their lists. But yeah, overall, it's more about the kind of level of comfort you're willing to give yourself for getting that first activation, because that's really the priority. So I think 4 units on the board, 5 units on the board is the region you probably want for an ambush list, and then the rest of that could be ambush. It could be up to 10 activations, so 5 of them, or it could be 1 or whatever.
I think that kind of also applies very well into the scout approach. I've found that doing a lot of tournament pack prep at the moment, one of the downfalls of heavy scout is actually then that I lose deployment. If I've got 4 scouts in a 7 activation army, I've only got 3 guys to put down in deployment, and my opponent can win deployment. They can have their juicy deadly 6 weapons lined up into my tough 12 targets. They can control the space if they've got a better range profile than me, much more effectively than I can. And yes, I can then use my scouts, but my scouts aren't always the best objective players. They're generally quite aggressive, or early game objective players if I'm playing progressive. So you can lose the game by over indexing. So yeah, I think that's quite important. And on the ambush point, I think an odd number of ambushes is better than an even number, for the point that Harvey said earlier in the video.
For sure, yeah.
If I throw one meaty ambusher at you, you can charge my other one. So I've lost my priority really there. So
yeah,
those are the points.
Similarly with Scout as well, right? Do things in odd numbers, because if you go first, then you're going to be able to do 2 of them. Obviously, for ambush, it's a lot more reliable because you can build around it. You can't do that with Scout. It's a coin flip.
Yeah.
And then for Deadly and Blast, so I think that if you think your list has a weakness to chaff or to tough, then I would bring one of these. So if you think you have a weakness to both, bring 1 deadly, 1 blast.
Yes.
If you think you've got a weakness, just bring 1 deadly for the tough ones, or just blast for the chaff ones. So this is assuming 2,000 points, and assuming that your deadly or blast solution comes to about 200 to 300 points, maybe. I think 1 is fine. I would much rather go for much more generalist units instead of specific units. One of the main tactical advantages of having a deadly or blast unit is the threat of it is so great that it can have a disproportionate effect, right? And it doesn't lead to you losing to skew lists. So if you have 6 flames on top of each other and your opponent is playing an all chaff list, and you put those 6 flames in the middle of the board, every single one of his units is now going to get up to 18 inches away and then stop moving, right? Because none of them want to get deleted by this flamethrower unit.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of value from having one of them, and then as you get more, you kind of get less value. So I think at most probably one deadly blast. I think if you've got a 200-point deadly blast, then you could probably go for 2 of them if you wanted to. But I'd much rather find solutions in AP instead of deadly and blast.
Yeah. There's an additional point raised by Iron Chicken, which is the balance for quality units and chaff units as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a strong believer in 2 of everything. That's the Harvey's golden ratio. If you're looking for the perfect list, it's got 2 of every unit you value in it,
and 1 naked hero,
and 1 and at least 1 naked hero. Right? You can have 3. You can do what you want. But yeah, I think
when you find something that's good at its role, it's so nice. Take it twice.
Yeah, exactly.
Either often, you get to double do it, or you've got redundancy protection.
Yeah, and the board's so wide, right? You got 6 foot width of a board. If you have 2 units, you can put 1 on the left, 1 on the right, and realistically, they can threaten board halves very easily. Because if you walk down the middle of a board, then you've got 16 inches on one side. Is that right? 16 inches on one side, 16 on the other side. No, 36, 18 inches either side of you, right?
Yeah.
You got 18 inches either side of you, which if you're a unit, actually you're threatening bigger space than that because you're a unit, and your opponent is a unit as well, so they're taking up inches on either side. So really, 2 units can move up the board and basically threaten everything on it. So I really like having two of a unit. I think is good. 3 if you're really, really in on that one strategy. But I think the second you add a third of a unit, most of the time it's coming out later on the list building. I go oh yeah, I'll have 3 of those, and I go actually, you know what? I would rather have a light walker.
Yeah. Brilliant. That is so. Actually, just to go back to that voice source, to answer directly, I don't think it's a ratio of percentages. I think it's a numerical counting of weight in activations and remembering that there is a big gray space in between. It's not absolutely 50-50 on this or whatever. It's sometimes just one activation here and one activation there. Iron Chicken asks, where is your build start point? Do you build around a particular unit, theme, or formula? We've talked about units, themes, approaches. Formula, I want to pick up on that. Do you have any formulae that you apply to list building?
Two of everything. No. What's my list build start? That's a really good question, actually. Most of the time it's a unit. I find a unit that I think performs really well, and I try and build a list around him, right? I think, if you find something that you think is, so like let's use HDF veterans as an example, right? Scout, shotgunners who can take flamethrowers or fusion rifles, right? Core 4, Def 5, whatever. If you're like, okay, I really like that unit, I'm going to stick my heroes in it and give it +1 quality. And that's what you're going for. You're like, I think this is a strong strategy, so I want at least that in my core. Then you can then build around its weaknesses, right? Because you know what the list looks like already, right? You're like, okay, I have a game plan in mind. I've got my 2 scouters. They're going to scout up the right side of the board. I'm going to kill the things in front of me. And then the rest of my army needs to be doing stuff to support that. So, for example, if you sitting out there right now listening to this have watched our video where we did HDF versus Robot Legions, but I ran a scout list like that, and I brought an aircraft because a really, really useful thing to support scouting units is an aircraft, right? Because you can fly over to the side of the board if they need help, and if they don't need help, you can fly to the other side of the board. But that all started with, okay, I want to bring scout shotgunners, and that's the theme. That's the thing I want to go for. That's the particular unit I picked, and I'm building a strategy around it. If you don't have a strategy in mind, you want to play something much more generalist. I always start with what I think the best unit is. So, for example, like Custodian Brothers, I would say that your base Custodian Brothers are really, really good, right? So immediately I'm like, okay, I want teleporting Custodians with spears in them. So I'm going to put 2 of them in, and then I'm going to see what the rest of the list looks like. What are they missing? What do they need to build on now? So for me, it's basically always starting with a unit. And if you don't have like a particular strategy based on that unit, then it's basically just the best unit, and then it's kind of filling the gaps from there. But yeah, so I suppose really it's find a unit that fulfills a strategy you've got in mind, and then fill the gaps for that strategy with the rest of your units, or triple down on that one thing, right? It may be the very case that you just go like, actually I'm going to have 3 scout shotgunners. Oh, well, I'm going to take some scout jeeps as well. I'm going to put some flamers in the scout jeeps and go from there. And then all of a sudden you've just got a whole scout list.
The theme can write itself, right?
Yeah.
Whilst you've been talking, I've been trying to think about this. And I've clicked into some armies that I don't really build with very much. While I've been doing it, I've clicked into Shadow Stalkers, Ossified Undead, Halflings, and Dark Elves from Fantasy. And I've noticed, as I clicked into Halflings, I'm doing the same pattern, which I'm clicking on it and scrolling to the bottom. I'm looking for good tough 9 and 12 models. And if I'm not finding them, I'm going back to the heroes, and I'm looking for good auras. Those are the auras that, as I said before, ratchet and multiply my damage output, or find some other fun thing that's going on. And I think that applying a formula that isn't pick a unit and build around it, a kind of blueprint I'm following at the moment is focusing on 7 activations, trying to find one tough 12 guy in there that's going to output quite effectively. I'm avoiding those units that don't output at least damage equal to their toughness. Ideally, I'm finding more. Then I'm going back into the core units. I'm identifying if they're valuable to me. Are they resilient and or deadly? I'm then looking for scouting units. Again, my focus at the moment is on tournament packs. If I'm playing base OPR, I'm looking at ambushing units. I'm trying to find 1 or 2 good ones of those. And then I'm looking for the ways to fill specialist roles. And this is back to that ratios point a bit. I'm looking for 1 good, reliable, and effective deadly outputting unit. I'm looking for at least 1, probably 2 good, effective, reliably outputting blast units. Blessed Sisters, we spoke about last week. I look at their walkers. I'm putting 1 or 2 of those in. I then think about flamers. I'm finding ways to get those in, the APC, and I'm thinking about deadly. I've got my fusion support of Celestial Sisters. And then from there, I'm finding ways of identifying the weaknesses and building out. Do I need scout? Do I need resilience? Do I need blocks of tough 3? That's probably the blueprint I'm applying.
Yeah. I think that's a fair way to go about it, right? Totally. I think, if you want bigger picture stuff, then obviously the start of this video is good for you, right? Like we talked through like big things like mobility and stuff like that. But I think But it's very similar, right? Like I'm looking for a juicy 1 unit, and you're looking for your kind of juicy tough 12 or whatever. And
Yeah.
building from a list.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Brill, let's move on to the infamous Sasquatch. What a name. Welcome to the server. You've given us 6 points to go through. And Voice Source has also reinforced point number 3. So let's see what happens there. Point number 1, how do you decide when to combine a hero with a unit?
So there's 2 ways this question could go. One is the hero rule says you pick when the game starts, whether it's deployed in a unit or not. If we're talking about that interaction, which I don't think is what we're talking about, but I'm going to cover it off anyway. Most of the time, the list informs whether the hero is going in it. If it's got an aura, then it's going in it. If it's not, it's not. There are some situations where you wouldn't want to deploy it with the unit despite the aura. One example would be if your opponent has a small number of activations, and you can get a lot of value out of a detached hero, who could just like mess around with the objectives. Like some heroes have Strider, very, very annoying for a more melee army to deal with, right? You can sit in some difficult terrain, you play run around the rosy with them, and get lots of value there. If we're talking from just a list building standpoint, when to put a hero in a unit, I think there's 2 good reasons to put a hero in a unit. One is obviously they have good auras, right? That's immediately the first assumption, right? Like we're not putting a hero in a unit unless it has good auras. But there are 2 situations where you would then embed that unit after deciding you've got an aura you want. One is like a multiplier, right? So you have a stack of 10 guys, and you've looked at like roughly how much damage they're doing, and they need the damage output to get more, right? So, let's go back to those kind of 10 shotgunners I was just talking about for HDF. I put a hero in there because them hitting on quality 3 is going to up their damage by a lot, and to start hitting some of those breakpoints we talked about before. So a huge one is definitely that, right? Like, does this unit need more? And if it does need more, then I'll put a hero in it. The other situation where I combine a hero with a unit is if I don't want to double up the unit, but I want a middle ground, right? I mentioned this in a couple of videos recently. But so a good example, let's say, is Ghostly Undead Wraiths. So Wraiths have 1 attack each, A2 and Reap. I don't know where they're at right now, but I could double that unit up, right? I don't know how much they cost even anymore. It's been so long. Oh my God. Let's say it's 270 points to double them up, right? Or I can embed a hero in it and it'll cost 230 points, and I'll get 8 attacks instead of 10. That's a nice middle ground where I've kind of got something for my money, and it's not quite as efficient as doubling up, but it's a slightly more reasonable amount to be spending on it. And if I think I've already hit the breakpoints I'm looking for, then I don't need to double up. So maybe a hero is a nice middle ground. So they're the 2 situations I'd go. One is, okay, I'm spending a lot on this unit and I want its damage to be multiplied by something, or I want a multiplicative effect from my hero. And the other is, I'm kind of like want something slightly more than what I've got right now, but it's not a main focal point, and I don't want to double it up. And I think, if I double it up, then maybe it's slightly too expensive, and a mid-ground thing. So they're the 2 main ones. And I would say that the second one, as in the half double up strategy, is very, very few and far between.
Yeah, it's more niche.
I think, yeah, way more niche. I think it's much more of like a list building constraint than anything else, right? You reach the end of the list and you're like, oh, maybe I'm going to undouble that up, put a hero in it instead, and then I'll get a couple of extra points for my upgrades instead, and I'll just compromise. Any thoughts from you?
The one big one, as you've said, is auras, really, and increasing damage output. Like if you see a shred aura, a furious aura, a fast aura, those are all really important ways of doing it. The aura chooseth the wizard, Mr. Potter. We talk about it all the time. You get a 20-point hero with auras. That motherfucker's going to be valuable, right? Like we talked about it with Sisters last week. Is it the fast aura is 10 or 20 points? So for 30 or 40 points, you're giving fast to a unit. That's really big. The one point I'm shocked you didn't mention, I'm surprised by this, is when you want to hide them. Your Saurian Starhost Frog Mages, your Caster 4s, you probably want to bury that big old froggy in a unit. And we've talked about it in the past. Where am I going to bury it? Either in a big fat meaty stack, but that might make that stack really, really expensive, or in a unit of 6 swarms, which are then just ablative wounds and very effective for keeping that guy alive.
For sure, yeah. I think there's kind of one other point here that I could also be the intention of the question, so I'm just going to cover it off really quickly. When I think the hero is cheap is another one, right? So if it's a 25 point hero, and I can get 30-point aura on it, then that's 50 points, right? And I'll take that all day, right? That's so cheap. It acts like an upgrade, right? Like you look at like the marks and stuff like that, they tend to be around like 30 to 40 points. Well, this guy costs roughly that amount, and he's got a gun in it, and he might help the morale and whatever. You compare that then to kind of like the tough 6 heroes, right? So I'm deciding, okay, is this hero meant to be combined in units at this point, right? I think if the base hero costs more than 50 points, I would have to have a really compelling reason to put it in a unit. And a compelling reason could be it has Fearless, and the unit I want to put it in has got Fearless. Or it could be like fast or whatever, right? It's a keyword toggle on and off, right? So at that point, I'm thinking like, okay, that might be worth my tough 6 just so I can get its effect in this unit. But most of the time, I'm thinking if it's a tough 3 and it's cheap, then I'm either not combining it and I'm doing naked hero stuff, or I'm using it just like another upgrade for the army. When you get those kind of weird middling point heroes that are like, like the high, I think it's called High Priest or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but in machine cults, they're I think it's maybe called High Priest. Their top hero, I think, is like 65 points or something like that.
A High Priest, he's 80 points.
80 points, yeah. He's a very, very expensive tough 3. He's got like a hybrid profile. I think he's got 3 attacks, AP4 or something like that, and he's also got a pistol. And it's like, well, he's almost too expensive now to combine into a unit, and he's kind of too expensive to run on his own. So at that point, I'm going like, well, actually, I don't want this hero at all unless I have to run him. So that's the other way that question could be interpreted. So just in case if it's none of those 3, then come back for round 2, ping me in the Discord, and I'll respond there.
Next question from our friend the Sasquatch is, how do you decide when to combine 2 units versus running them separate? Now, this is like a question that I do in practice, and I will go in between, but I don't know how I'd articulate an answer other than by saying activation count, really. Like, combine 2 units because I want to get the threat out of it. I want to really make sure I'm wiping out its target, versus running them separate. I don't have enough activations. I think that's maybe my answer to that one.
Yeah, obviously doubling up a unit is very appealing. You get more damage, right? There's certain things. So like I would say tough 1s, A2 tough 1s, you're basically always doubling them up to 10. Cost is the only real reason I wouldn't, right? So if my doubled up A2 tough 1 unit is 400 points, and it's a main focal point of my army, and I'm very happy to build around it and play around it, and it be like important and activated early and kept safe by my other units, then sure. If this is a unit that isn't core to my strategy, we talk about this often with the number of points. I can't remember how much it is now, like 270 points or so. If you take 2,000 and divide by 7, you reach a point count where anything below that number, in theory, is not part of your core strategy, and anything above that number is part of your core strategy because it's worth more than the average. So if combining a unit pushes it above that threshold, and it wasn't a unit that you were going to use as part of your core strategy, then I would not combine it, is basically the answer.
I think so. It's 285 points.
285 points, yeah.
Saurian Star Host Warriors, I think, is one that's at the front of my mind. I can't remember if we've recently discussed it on camera or off, but I'm just going to scroll down to them here on my other screen, which is so there are 100 points for 5 of them, and you give them all the carbines, it's 120 points, and then a protection feat is 10 more. So we're at 130 points. If you double that unit up, what do you get? You get 20 attacks, qual 4 primal, AP nothing. We're not at that 285 point plus breakpoint that we've just talked about, but at 260 points, I'm damn close. Is it an all-comer unit? Is it dealing with all these threats? No, it's got bugger all AP. Is it reliable? No, it's quality 4. 50% of the time it's hitting. Is it a big meat stack? No, it's defense for 10 wounds. That also, because it's not a tough unit, it loses attacks per wound it takes. So if it's not doing the thing or a thing really well, then I'm not doubling it up.
Yeah, the other thing to think about combining units is it plays a little bit into the first point. If you're going to put a hero in them, right? You're already investing some sort of points in that, and if you're not looking for that middle ground option, then combine 2 units instead of running them separately. And that also applies to auras within units, right? oftentimes you'll see units that have 3 different aura options, pick one. And if you double them up, you can take both. Right. So you could, like custodians, once again, they can take teleport and regen. Right. Yeah. And when you combine those two together, your regen guy is now giving regen to 6 models instead of 3, really and your teleport guy is giving it to 6 guys instead of 3, right? So you've doubled the efficiency of both of those upgrades by just doubling up. So if you're running things like light auras within the unit, that's another really good reason.
HTF, regen, and morale boost, another one.
Yeah. The other thing, the other point I guess I want to get across about this as well is then roll, right? So let's say you've made all these decisions and you decide, okay, primary strategy, not primary strategy, whatever. And then you're looking at this unit, you're going, well, it's a swarm. It costs 60 points, right? Does it really matter if I double it up or not? Because it's so low, it's still not main strategy. It doesn't quite, you haven't quite answered my question there. Roll is the huge thing, right? So for example, in the case of a swarm, it gets charged and it dies, right? Because it's def 6, right? Let's say a 20 attack unit charges it, hits it 14 times. It takes 9 wounds, and then 6 wounds disappear into the ether because it's been overkilled. If you were running that swarm combined, those 6 wounds go on the other half of the unit, right? And now you're taking morale checks, and they could flee, you waste points. If the only reason you brought the swarms is to contest objectives, then it doesn't matter if they're 1 unit, right? You want them as 2 units, so you can go like, okay, you can't deal with both of these at the same time because they're really hard to deal with. You have to have a way of splitting fire, and that's then less reliable for you, and you have to have a strategy that can cope with this on that side of the board, and it kind of forces your opponent's hand a bit more. Yeah. So that's a really good reason. And then, activation count, like you said.
Activation count.
Yeah. If you're at 6 activations and you've doubled up a unit to 400 points, well, unless it's going to be one of your first 3 activations, then maybe undouble it, lower its priority, give yourself space to have those lower priorities activations.
Yeah. Cool. Point 3, how does your list building change at different point values? We've got an additional bit to this. Foysaw saying that their local group plays at 2,500 points.
Yeah, so this is a tough one, really.
This is hard.
The game changes quite a lot as the points change. So, let's take 1,000 points as an example, right? 1,000 points is a really small amount of units, and I think you're capped at 5 activations, and you could have up to 5 objectives on the board, right? So, at 1,000 points, I'm going, I need all my 5 activations. If I bring less than that and I lose one, I could just lose on objectives alone before I've really started the fight.
Yeah.
As you start to hit 2,000, then we take that up to 7 to kind of give you that buffer. And then when you start to 3,000, well, objectives are becoming less and less of an issue at that point because you've already kind of dealt with the minimum number you need to deal with objectives. And now it's just about that kind of arms race of an activation count, whereby you don't want to be so heavily out activated by your opponent that let's say they have 5 chaff units and you have 5 guys, they activate their 5 chaff, you activate your 5 guys, and then they get to do whatever they want on the board for as many turns as they want, which might involve moving all their guys closer to your guys, and then you can't deal with them all at the same time. So from an activation standpoint, definitely that. The other thing that happens as well as you go higher up in value is people spend more points on fancier things, right? So Titans, for example, become you could begin to buy them at higher points, but also people are much more likely to buy them because you're in a higher point game, right? They're playing 3,000 points. They probably want a big stompy walker or 3.
Hell yeah.
So tough becomes a lot more viable, a lot more likely to see. So absolutely, a need for higher AP and a need for higher deadly starts to come in. Same with aircraft, right? Aircraft's drawback is that they can't contest objectives. Well, at higher points, because you've already got that redundancy from the number of units you've got, aircraft are a lot more popular, right? So you need a way of dealing with these. So I think the need for higher AP and the need for more deadly is what grows the most as you go through the points, because if we just think about, if I have 3,000 points and I buy 5 walkers, and let's say they all cost 300 points, that's 1,500 points, and there's 5 objectives, and I put 1 walker on each objective, that means you need something at every single objective that can deal with a Def 2 Tough 12 unit, right? And if you don't have that, then they're going to capture those points. There's nothing you can do about it, right? It's too hard for your units to break through. You're kind of screwed. And because that was only 15,000 points, 1,500 points, I can now have a bunch of other shit in my army as well. But that requirement for you to be able to deal with Def 2 is still there. So as you got higher points, absolutely. More AP, more deadly, more ways of dealing with things before they get close to you as well, right? Because you want to be taking advantage of round 1 as well. So like longer range guns start to matter a bit more, right? Because you want to stop them from getting closer to you, which you might not have been able to afford previously, and they might now be able to afford longer range guns themselves. So a bit of an arms race there as well, for sure.
The 2 points I'd add, one is building on that last point, which is if you're using, it's not called Balval. Hello, cat. My cat's rejoined me. He's hungry. If you're using Forsorg, thank you. The cap on the maximum number of points a single unit can be increases. Which applies downwards, right? So if you're playing at 1,000 points, Age of Fantasy or something, you're not going to see something that's more than 350 points. It's 35%, right? Not 30. Yeah. 350 points, whereas at 3,000 points, that's 1,050? Probably more. It's about 1,000 points. What do you get for 1,000 points? Well, it's a big fuck off tough 24 unit. So Deadly is naturally going to be more relevant there. Deadly is then naturally going to be way, way less relevant down at 1,000 points. And then conversely, because of that, Blast becomes your friend at 1,000 points in those low point value games, because how are people reaching their activations? They're bringing chaff, they're bringing multi-model units. So your blast guns are going to be a little bit better there.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing I'd add is that when playing at lower points value, your points impact is going to have a bigger impact on the percentage of points in your opponent's army. What do I mean by that? If I have a 50-point upgrade that wipes out a unit at 3,000 points, that unit might have been 10-15% of my opponent's army. If that 50-point upgrade wipes out an activation at 1,000 points, that's going to be 20+% of my opponent's army. So the example I've got in my mind is casting debuff that you see in Blessed Sisters. If my opponent at 1,000 points has spent 80+ points on a caster that they're trying to pump out their level 3 spell every turn, that 10-point upgrade is really very effective. It has a much bigger impact on their percentage output, and so if I'm playing at lower points, I think about skew abilities like that can be really, really destructive.
Yep.
Cool. We have so many questions to go through, so let's keep going. What is your preferred point value to play at? Easy answer here for us.
Yeah, 2,000 points for Grimdark Future, 1,500 for AOF. It's just what all our events use, really. It's also just comes from a personal preference about the roundedness of armies. The more points you get, the more flexibility you get during lists building, which can lead to more kind of skew lists. You get more total number of units as well, so they can now run 4 instead of 3. My preference when it comes to list building is more constraints, not less, because I think constraints build creativity.
Yes, exactly.
So
Stole the words out my mouth.
So I think 2,000 points is 2,000 points where we play, isn't it?
Yeah, 2,000 points feels good. Just because when you go a little bit higher up, you can do more easily. You can do more easily. Whereas at 2,000 points, we're struggling to jam that last thing that really rounds out the list and makes it that bit easier. And it's just that little bit of a curb on it. How many casters should you run is the next question here. And I think I saw that there's a follow-up question, which is when to not take a caster.
Okay.
We're going to have to answer this in short fashion because I think that a caster video could be another hour-long conversation.
For sure. Casters get better the more you run of them. It's the truth, right? Casting things on a 2-up is going to win you the game. Casting things on a 4-up is going to lose you the game. So you want to stack as many casters as you can fit in a list if you believe that your spell list is good, right? So by good, I mean damage.
So I'm actually going to take it one step further and say not just good, but better than good. A good amount above average.
Yeah, so if you've got 6 AP2, That's a really great all-rounded spell. You can stack casters till the cows come home, right? Really, really efficient way of doing it. Dealing damage, hit multiple targets, brilliant. If you don't have a spell like that in your list, and you're just primarily focusing on buffing stuff, then really you just need to bring enough casters to be able to cast your one buff spell on a 2-up, right? So if let's go back to Vampiric Undead again, let's say you build your strategy around, in fact, we did a list doctors on it, right? Like you bring one of the big shambling guys, like the 700 point Butcher Titans, and you're like, I need to cast teleport on this guy. Bring enough casters such that you can cast it on a 2-up round 1 and cast it on a 2-up round 2 and a 2-up round 3. So what that is a caster 3 and a caster 2, right? If that's all you care about, 2-up casting, that's all you want. If you're bringing it for damage, then it's literally just bring as many as you possibly can, because if you think it's good at 1, then what we were saying about like highly efficient, highly aggressive units applies infinitely, right? So if you have a cheap hero who can get casted 3 and has a good damage spell, spam that shit. As long as you're not sacrificing too much flexibility, because obviously casting tends to be low AP. AP2, I think, is the max you can get from casting, apart from fucking rats, so you can get AP4 for no reason. So as long as you're not sacrificing too much AP and flexibility in your army, then you've got a good casting list, go absolutely mental.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree with that one. And
yeah, you'll find a lot of people who don't like caster has run one caster.
Yeah.
They've just bought one caster and they've gone like, right, my level 3. Oh, it's a 2. All right, next round. Oh, my level 3 again. Oh, so it's a 3 this time. Okay, I failed 2 of my spell cast and now he's been charged and he's dead. That's the thing that people hate about casters. Whereas if you smokily roll it on a 2-up all the time and blow up units, then you all of a sudden you're like, I love casters. Casters are so great, right?
The 4-up is so fickle. And I know it's a 50% success rate, but that motherfucker's like a 30% success rate.
Yeah, for a game where front-loaded damage is all that matters, 50% on the first round is never good enough, right? You want 2-ups in the first round because you remove your opponent's stuff, and then it doesn't matter because then they've got less stuff to hit you with.
Yeah, really important. 6th is a big fuck you to Warboss Bitch who slandered me in our Discord. Why do you not like biscuits and gravy when it is factually the best dish on earth as proven by science? One, I've had biscuits and gravy once, but I've never been to the States. It was made for me by a lovely, lovely friend when I lived in Belfast. It was pretty damn good. She made it for me because I was complaining that I couldn't get actually factually the best dish on earth, which is cheesy gravy chips. And I will fight all of you to the death over the fact that a good cheesy gravy chip is the best dish that any human being could ever want or need or crave.
Is that pouton? Is that what it's called? Is that
pouton is a French swear word.
Oh no,
poutine is what you're trying to say.
Poutine. Is that spelled the same?
Pardon?
It's spelled the same.
I'm pretty sure it's not. Poutin is Putain, whereas poutine is, I don't actually know.
With an E on the end, I guess, right? Either way, yeah.
No,
that's what that is, isn't it? Cheesy gravy with
have I just dropped a big Canadian-US divide in? Let's keep going before I really start a fight.
Yeah, because it's a Canadian dish, yeah. Fries topped with fresh, squeaky cheese curds covered in hot, savoury beef or chicken gravy.
It's got squeaky cheese on it, right? So I'm talking about just good old-fashioned cheddar. We don't need much more than, as does Sainsbury's Tesco's finest. Poutine's a bit more specialist. Never had it, but my understanding is. So I've just lost us every American subscriber, I'm sure.
My next question is, I have been to America. I've never tried biscuits and gravy, but I do like hobnobs. So you're half right.
No, it's not. No, it's not that kind of.
I know.
I know. Oh no, the British answer is actually not knowing what biscuits and gravy is. Oh, it's like a scone, pretty much. But it's not a scone before I piss anyone off.
I'm sure it's absolutely lovely. But gravy is also not gravy, is it? It's like a white liquid or something.
Oh yeah, it's a different kind of gravy.
Yeah, it's a different gravy as well.
Yeah, it's
I don't know, guys. Come over here, have some Yorkshire puddings. It'll change your mind.
This guy bought a pack of Yorkshire puddings as a post-night out snack, and I've still got them in my freezer. He bought them like 3 years ago.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me put them in. I was like, why would you have Yorkshire puddings? They're like,
because you want chips and gravy. And
just put some Yorkshire puddings in, lad. Come on.
Anyway, Cultist. Hello, Cultist. Thank you very much for your questions. How does list building change between Age of Fantasy and Grimdark Future? Oh, fuck. That's another, video-long question to answer.
So we kind of touched on this before, luckily. GDF, AP, AOF, less so, more about mobility.
Yeah.
I would say that they're the two big things, right? I think it's really hard to go completely wrong with an AOF list as long as you bring some mobility. And it's really hard to go completely wrong with a GDF list as long as you bring some AP. And by some AP, I mean some AP4. That would be my answer.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. With Age of Fantasy as well, actually, because there's way less Deadly 3 and way less AP, if you want to skew it, bring the tough death stuff. Mummified Undead if I were going to an all Age of Fantasy event, I'd be bringing Shiv Kingdoms and Mummified Undead at the moment. They've got huge mobility. Shiv Kingdoms have a level of mobility that should not exist in the game, and they can reliably put out damage that just wipes out within the ecosphere of Age of Fantasy. They can just wipe out whole units. Mass impact at 20-inch charges should not be in the game when it's a 24-inch game. Mummified Undead have got their giants, which are Qual 4, Def 3, Tough 12 units for 195 points. If you want chaff in Mummified Undead, it's those. It's excellent.
Yeah, the three best things in AOF are the banner for +1 morale.
Yeah.
Impact and spellcasting. Okay?
Yeah.
So they're the three things I really, really want to prioritize in AOF because impact gives you quality defying damage output.
Yeah.
Banner gives you really, really cheap morale. It's totally worth it. It's like 5 points for an extra 1 morale. It's bonkers. And caster, as mentioned before, tends to be quite low AP, but we're playing it in AOF. So you'll absolutely blap a bunch of units. In GDF, I think the only real thing to really focus on is probably AP4. I think the other ones lose some of their power when the defense starts to go a bit higher. So really just kind of like good, solid AP threats is what I'm looking for when I'm building a GDF list.
Second question, how do threat assessment, please? This is activation priority and threat assessment. This is, again, an entire video on itself.
Yep.
I think my top tip for this is points is a really good heuristic. If your opponent has got a 500-point model, you probably want to you want to go 100 or 0. You either want to wipe that motherfucker off the planet so it can't ruin your game, so you prioritize that, or you ignore it, as Harvey said, which is like a very Harvey statement of old, and you find another thing that you can kill, you can probably just overkill, and is a threat to you.
Yeah. So we do actually have a video on activation. If you want to go watch that, if you search our channel, you'll find it. It's one of our kind of like older videos. And that should help with the threat assessment thing. We do mention it a little bit there on how to activate, and that kind of ties into threat assessment. But what I would say in terms of threat assessment is look at their units, pick the units that's going to fuck up your plan the most, and then decide how easy they are to deal with.
Yeah.
So if they've got a 400-point support style unit that's got 6 wounds, that is an enormous threat because its damage output is so high, but it's really easy to deal with. So it's a really efficient threat to deal with, right? So find a way of dealing with that. If they have an enormous walker that's really hard to kill on Def 2, does an enormous amount of damage, but you can't kill it in 2 charges, then it's a huge threat, but it's not a priority to kill because you're going to throw all your stuff into it. It's going to bounce off it, and your opponent's going to continue activating, killing the stuff that's the rest of your army, basically. So I'm looking for glass cannon units first, right? I think in general, you want to go from the most threatening tough 1 unit down to then the most threatening tough 3 unit, the most threatening 6, 9, 12, whatever. That's the kind of the way I do threat assessment. If you're talking from a list building standpoint, then just pick the thing that's going to fuck up your strategy. So you should have built the list with the strategy in mind. I know Coulter is the one who built the all snipers list, right?
Yeah,
for Rebel Guerrillas to one of the TTS tournaments. And an all snipers list, really, really good at killing like tough 1s, upgrades, and stuff like that, right? Really bad at killing tough 12 stuff. So you don't want to try and kill the tough 12 stuff. You want to try and kill everything else. Now, as it stands, an all sniper list isn't very good. But, you know, if you're picking like, okay, this thing threatens me, but I can't kill it, then it might as well not. You might as well just discount it, right? Because you're like, I can't ever deal with that threat. So it's now immediately the lowest priority because I just can't do anything to it.
Lovely. And then next question is, Caster is really useful. Caster is usually useful, but what are some armies where Caster is a lot more niche as a list building decision? I think we've kind of touched on that in that it's not, if it's not generalist with good high damage spells like 9 hits and 6 hits AP2, then it's becoming more niche because it's not generalist. It's looking at your strategy, if you need to teleport, or your weaknesses.
Yeah, I think back in the day, I would say Cassie was good in maybe 60% of armies. Nowadays, I think it's probably down to 30.
Yeah.
One thing that Cassie really does for you is it helps you against chaff. It lets you affect multiple units, and it lets you kill lots and lots of weak stuff. If there's less of that going on, then Caster becomes less useful naturally, right? 6's AP2 is not that useful against a Def 2 Tough 12 monster. The other situation, obviously, is when it's Caster 2. I think in general, if you're running a Caster 2, it's because you've got a really good level 1 buff most of the time.
Or you've got a Caster 3 that you need to feed in.
Yeah, exactly. So an example, perhaps in one we built recently, Saurian Star Hosts have access to, I think it's Bane on enemy and Primal Boost buff in their casting spell list. So Dave built a list the other day with just like a Caster 2 on a Pterodactyl, or no, on a Ripidactyl. So it could put down its precision mark on the enemy, and then it could also buff the Ankylosaurus with both Bane and debuff the enemy and buff the Ankylosaurus to make the Ankylosaurus more effective for an extra, I don't know, like 100 points or something. So there are situations like that where you might want to consider a caster just as a small utility box. But I would always contrast them versus similar things. So like HDF leaders get precision shooter buff is 35 points for a +1 to hit every turn. If you're spending 35 points for a 50-50 to do that every turn, you're probably being scammed. You want to be using the toolbox ability of casting really to get the most value out of it.
Yeah, if you're only casting one spell, it needs to be a fucking great spell, right? And that can be damage. But if it's one of the utility spells, you got to have a reason. And there's the question of, can I do it elsewhere in the list? Cool. Let's keep going. Yere LA, thank you for your question. Grimdark Future Tournament Pack 2026. Oh, should you build your list with missions in mind, including side missions? Yes. And if you find out how to do that for all 4 scenarios, come and tell us, because we have not figured that out yet.
Yeah, so the answer is obviously yes. I think the big thing to know about building things for lists, building things for tournament packs, right, is not building something for all the lists, all the missions, right?
All the scenarios,
Yes, it's building stuff for the most polarizing of them, right? So if you look at the current tournament pack, 2 and 3 are the most polarizing of the missions, right? Because 3 is pick and carry, so you can lose the game in the first round, right? If your opponent starts to get away from you. And 2 is you deploy in front of each other so you can lose the game on the first round. So if your list has ambush in it, right, and you use that ambush, you're very likely going to lose those rounds because you're not on the board in those first crucial rounds, right? So it's really, really important that you look at the missions that you think are going to be most difficult to win and build your list around that. And then all the easy ones, you should be able to stand a chance in because you've built for the most difficult one, if you get what I mean. Now, as it stands for Tournament Pack 2026, that basically just means bring enough Scout, because 2 and 3 really benefit from Scout, and actually 4 has got quite a restricted deployment zone. So you can build Scout there as well. This video is going to go up this weekend, but in the near future, we'll cover missions 3 and 4 on the channel as well. So if you're looking for full missions 1 to 4 and our thoughts on it, there'll be a playlist up. Already the first 2 missions are up on the YouTube channel already.
Yeah, I think kind of adding to that, saying the exact same thing in the inverse really is, don't not do it. Don't blunder yourself into a list of all tough 12 heroes, because you will suck up and lose quite a few points on those specific missions. it's not such a bad thing if you bring tons of 5+ units, because I presume you're doing something with that. And so that one mission where that's an objective, a side mission, it's not so painful. Actually, the extra point is you've hinted at it. Try to avoid building an army that just sucks dick on the two deployment restrictive games. The pick and carry mission 3 and mission 4, that spearhead long edge deployment. It's actually really fucking awkward to deploy effectively on mission 4, so try not to screw yourself there. But otherwise, it's really hard to cover all bases. But yes is the answer to the question. Should you build your list with missions in mind? Yes.
Yeah, I think for side missions as well, it's worth saying you should be considering side missions if you can. For example, the side missions that say like destroy more units with 5 or more models in it than your opponent, right? If you can avoid bringing 5 or more model units into the tournament, then you're going to have a leg up there. I wouldn't be completely allergic to them if it's required for your book to do well.
Yeah.
Don't sacrifice your one answer to Tough 12 just to not have those style of units in it. Same with the Hero one and same with the Tough 12 one, right? Like don't think too much about it. But have it in the back of your mind as you're throwing together your list. If you're like, okay, I can pick between having a stack of 10 or a tough 9 unit, go for the tough 9 unit, because that way you're circumventing that. And if they do roughly the same thing, then you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very fine line, and I don't have the finesse for it. Don't not do it. Don't spend your whole time focused entirely on them. Instead, find your happy compromise. Where are you happy to compromise on bringing points that will lose for the greater good of winning the whole thing? So, yeah. Thank you, Yere LA. On to JDD Jargamot. Are there cookie cutter roles when list building that you feel are required or very important? He's thinking a movable object like a blob of spheres in AOF, or a high mobility joker, a Death Star, a throwaway activation. I mean, that last one, throwaway activation, he's even put in like swarms or naked heroes, and I think Harvey would not leave home without a naked hero.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to this question is yes. If you're trying to build an all-comers list, almost certainly yes. One thing I want to touch on, actually, we say throwaway activation quite a lot on this channel. Just to put a definition behind that, when we say throwaway activation, we mean something you can activate and it do nothing. Not an activation you throw away by letting your opponent kill it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so swarms and naked heroes are a good example of that, right? Because they're so cheap. But you want them alive so they can play the objectives.
You mentioned it right back at the start when you said a unit that can double move and that's all it does, and you're happy with it.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I do think those things exist. I think because you're activating your army in order, I think you want to bring some activations you don't care about. So that's the throwaway activations. So chaff style units, swarms, naked heroes, whatever it be. I think absolutely you should be considering some of those just because they're so cheap, right? Like you can use that to plug an activation gap and spend more points on your other units without losing the activation game, right? Like if you have 2 naked heroes in your list, you could run a 5 activation list as long as you keep those heroes safe the whole time, but close enough to impact the game. Then that's as good as having a 100-point chaff unit, and you've paid 25 points for it. But obviously, it requires a lot bigger investment of you to try and keep them safe, and perhaps a bit of luck with how the board's laid out and so on. For the rest of them, I would say no. I think you definitely want chaff in a list, but the rest of them, I'd say it all depends on your strategy. On the topic of like immovable objects and stuff like that, defense gets better the more defense you have. So I don't mean that on an individual unit. I mean that across the army. So if you have one Def 2 unit and they have one AP4 unit, they can point their AP4 unit at your Def 2 unit and get value. If you have 5 Def 2 units and they have one AP4 unit, it will try and kill one of those units, and then the rest of your units will go, hey, that's the only guy who threatens us on the board. Let's murder him. Or
even better, sometimes just let's ignore him and maximize that he has one activation.
Yeah, exactly, right? So from a strategic level, I would say think more about what your list is trying to do, and then that should present some roles to you. But I would say for sure bring throwaway activations. for sure bring core units and for sure bring throw activations, right? Core units being like what your strategy is based around. So bring at least 2 of those for your strategy and bring at least a handful of things that you can consider throwaway activations. Or, in the game mode where someone puts an objective in the far corner, you don't have to go, I guess I'll deploy my 300-point unit to go take that. And instead you go like, 20-point or whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
Because you're going to win on the rest of the board that way.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you, Jargamot. Toad Brews, when should you build a SKU list versus a generalist list?
That is a really hard question to answer. I would say bring a generalist list if you are going to a competitive event.
Yeah.
And you want to stand your best chance of just winning. An all-comers list is going to give you that. No list is ever going to stomp a day. Bring a SKU list if you don't mind bottoming out in the first round, right? So SKU lists are basically like your ultimate gambler's list, right? A hard SKU list, sometimes you come across the guy who's brought the SKU list that counters you and you drop out immediately.
Yeah.
If you want to play the game of like, I just pray I dodge all the guys running the counter to my list, then that's when you bring a SKU list. Other times to bring a SKU list is for narrative events, right? If you've got like a really silly idea in mind, and you're just going to like a fuck around day and it's not like, ultra competitive, you're not desperately trying to win and win some prizes or whatever. And you just want to try out like, all flamer list or whatever it be, right? Then that's the time for it, I think.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one, especially on that last point of not every event, even if it's competitive, right? Not every event has to be your day of competitive events. I'm looking forward to bringing a Titan Lords list in 3.5. Because we've got access to these T9s, we usually play at 2K. I think a Titan Lords list is like a 3-1 list at the moment across 4 events, and so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I'm not going in with anything less than being ready to 0-4 because I might just face all the wrong shits all day.
Yeah, the other slight caveat to that is when your book only supports a certain playstyle.
Yes.
Right. So like Titan Lords, for example, you can
Elven
only
Jesters.
build a SKU list with it. Elven Jesters, same thing. Dark Elf Raiders to an extent, right? When all you can build is that one particular skewed playstyle, then you should lean into it because don't try and force yourself to build a generalist list, right? Don't hear us saying like, oh, try and mix melee and range. But if you have no good range units, it's not even worth trying.
Yeah. Very good. The second question here from Toad Brews is, what is the maximum percentage of your points you're willing to spend on a single unit or model? Ooh, so much context.
I think 25% is where I'm most comfortable. Right? I say most comfortable. That's where I'm least comfortable. That's the top end, right?
Sorry, yeah.
When something hits 500 points, that's when I start to go like, ooh, is there a better solution?
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with... So, context. I'm fine with that. For example, Alien Hives, Hive Lord, HDF Tank Commander, when I have other ways of making up my activations with decent burners, throwaway units. Alien Hives, I'm fine with buying a Hive Lord because I can just stick in 2 Hive Swarms, and then with the 2 Hive Swarms, I have 3 activations and I've spent 600-700 points. So I'm in a pretty alright spot on activations to then round out my list. HDF recruit to 75 points. Double stack of infantry dudes is 180 points-ish with regeneration. Don't fact check me on that. It's not quite right, but I can bring the tank because I can make up my activations elsewhere in effective ways. Otherwise, yeah. The exception to this is if I've got a big fuck off cool dude, then I'm just doing it. I don't care about the points, and then I might make it up later.
Or if you really need the unit, right? If you, like we were saying before, if you identify a need in your army and the only way of solving that problem is with a 600-point walker, then you've just got to take the 600-point walker, right, and build your list around it.
The block of 6 custodians, for example, that's 600-ish points.
Yeah.
But again, I think as well with that, I'm more comfortable doing it because they've got effectively 27 wounds with regen. They're def 2 up, AP -1. So my risk, and they're 3 up morale into fearless, right? The risk of that thing going pop is way lower than if I'd have brought a burrower from Alien Hives, who's tough 15 now, def 2 up, but he's qual 4 up with the +1 thing. He's qual 4 up, so only half of his attacks hit in a given round on average, and he still has a 33% chance of failing a morale check. That is a lot for a 500-600 point unit.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as well. Things can get very expensive but have bad defense or low toughness or whatever. I'm not willing to spend a large percentage of my points on something that I don't think survives a charge.
Yeah.
Right. It's about getting value, right? Like if I spend 400 points on a walker, but I kit him out with blast weapons, A1, blast 3 weapons, and I don't think he's going to get 400 points of value, then I'm not going to spend that much on him, basically.
It's an important point to remember that my naked hero, my 20-point novice sister, has as much weighting on an objective as your tough 24 Titan.
Sure.
So
exactly.
There's really important breakpoints there. Thank you, Toad Brews. Only a few questions left. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. If you've made it this far into the video, do comment down below and say, are casters worth it? Let's just have that. Let's have that be it. How does list building change with progressive versus basic objective scoring? Asks Dr. Dacker.
Yes, we kind of grazed off this a little bit at the start of the video. I think the big thing about progressive versus basic objective scoring, there's two things. One, being on the board round 1 is hugely important,
and able to contest objectives.
Yeah, exactly right. So mobility, scout, number of activations, all of those things matter for getting onto the points. I think if you're building, if you know you're playing progressive, then it is basically the bum rush the objectives game mode. And the ability to decap your opponent's points round 1 can basically win you the game from there. Depending on what kind of progressive you're playing. If you're playing no combat mechanics, then it can be almost trivial to win a game like that. If you just have more mobility than your opponent, right? You can just scout up the board, decap their stuff, cap your stuff. Realistically, they're not getting to your points anytime soon. They're having to scrap over theirs. You win the game. So yeah, if you're building for progressive, scout, transports, that's it really. Back rank protecting units can be useful somewhat for progressive. If you have chaff style units that you can just encircle an objective so they can't stand on it. Yeah. Very potent, right? Every turn you have an objective. If you think about like if you move forwards on the first turn, decap theirs, cap yours, and there's 4 objectives, you're 2 points up already. Next round, they can at most probably get 2 points. You get another 2 points. You've already got double the amount of points than them, right? Like for them to now catch up in that, it's extremely difficult.
It is, yeah. It's holding an objective early and moving off of it means that I've got my point, I'm threatening more points on the board, and they have to do a move to decap it. So if you're all melee as well, like I'm not saying that all shooting is best because it's not. This is important where building for mixed, for progressive. But if you are all melee, and round 1 I decap one of yours because I've brought an effective scout or a transport that you haven't killed because you can only charge one thing at a time, and I decap you, then round 2, after capping all my own points, I move off them. For you to now get objectives, you're sacrificing a charge. You have to, if I leave my units on the point, you charge, you kill something, and you get the point. So I could easily undermine that. Don't let yourself get stuck in that trap, really.
Yeah, the thing you can guarantee with progressive, one thing you can guarantee with progressive is your opponent's going to walk towards the objectives because they have to, right? I mean, you can probably tell I much prefer the base objectives to progressive, but there's no space for taking time in progressive. You have to be on the point.
There's
you have
no
to
breathing room
right now, right? So what that means is when you're building a list, you can build a list that takes advantage of that, right? You know your opponent's going to walk towards you. So scout is very potent, right? You could be halfway at the board. They have to move towards you, so you get the charges. You get to take your time. You get to control spaces, and they have to walk into you. They have to double move most of the time, right? If the objectives are like along the middle line, they have to double move something round 1, which is completely fragile. If you have scouters, you just blow them up. So just build with lots of scout for progressive, lots of transports. Ranged units can be good. Don't bring any ambushers. They're basically pointless, right? If an ambusher comes down,
pretty much fucking useless.
They're a complete throw. If your ambusher comes down round 2 and does something, and your opponent holds an objective, they've held it for the first 2 turns. it then recaps best case scenario. It gets 2 turns of it. All it's done is nothing, right? It's getting you 2 points. They've lost 2 points.
Net zero, right?
Whereas a scout unit could have just decapped round 1, immediately lost them a point, immediately lost them a point again, and gone from there, or even worse, won it. So yeah, and basic objective scoring. I think you can bring ambush back into the picture. Basically, scout's still very potent, but I think ambush is much better in basic objective scoring. Absolutely. I think you can afford to play much lower strategies with basic objective. If you're playing like a Daoist, where you're doing lots of shooting, you can do lots of shooting and move on to the points whenever you want to. You can choose slower strategies like that. So yeah, I think you just get a lot more flexibility with your list building in basic objective scoring.
Yeah, you do. It's a point that you've raised in the past, and I'm starting to agree with. Round 1 shouldn't have any point scoring in progressive because of just how warping it can be.
I would totally be in favor of like round 2 being 1 point, round 3 being 1 point, round 4 being 2 points. So you still have that like end of game spike. Gives the slower armies a chance to compete. But yes.
Thank you, Dr. Daka. And now Dakasaur Dan has got 2 questions, which I'm afraid, Dakasaur Dan, we will be doing quite quickly because I think we have answered these already. The first is, when is it worth burying a unit in chaff? Burying a hero in chaff, I think, is what they mean there. For example, Frog Mage with Cyber Swarms. We've talked about that. Usually it's where the caster is valuable.
Yeah, I think basically there are very, very few situations in the game where that's worthwhile. Casting is basically exclusively it, or sometimes stuff like precision shooter buffs if you really want to protect it. But I think often you can protect them just through keeping them out of line of sight.
I have one additional point that we actually, really naughtily of us, we didn't cover, which is where you've got a unit of 20 qual 6 dudes and you want to improve their morale. So you stick a qual 3 hero in, and then they're all rolling off of that hero's morale. Yeah.
But I think for the most part, most of the time you're not doing it. There's a couple of edge cases, right? Like big like double units of recruits with a company leader in it can get, 3 up morale instead of 5 up, right? Stuff like that. But I think for the most part, you're doing it for the auras and you want to make use of the auras.
Yeah, absolutely. And then question number 2 is, how do you determine what is enough deadly at various point levels? I.e., do you aim to wipe out armor by a certain turn, or enough to wipe it out by the end of the game? That is 2 questions. The first one I think we've answered a little bit when we talked about different points values of games. I'd missed this. I do want to pick this second question up. I think it's a really good question to round out on. Do you aim to wipe out armor by a certain turn, or enough to wipe it out by the end of the game?
My goal with wiping things out is wiping it out on the very first shot I do. I want to use 1 activation to kill their guy. I don't want to use 2 activations. Most of the time, because stuff like Tough 12 doesn't lose any effectiveness when you shoot it. So if you shoot it, it's a waste of time until you kill it. So to get the most value, you have to kill it on that first shot. That's very, very difficult to do. Only some units in the game can do it. Lots of doubled up units can, but like just base units can't really do that. Wiping out by the end of the game, I think, is probably too late. One thing that, if we're talking about tanks in particular, a lot of them get stride, a lot of them get fast. So you kind of like round 1 shoot or something, round 2 shoot or something, round 3 shoot or something, round 4 double move onto a point. So by that point, it's already accrued hundreds of points of value, and now it's just acting as an objective capper. So yes, it's useful to kill it, but no more than killing any other unit on the board. So I also think like whittling away at this stuff is just not really that useful unless you manage to get shakes and stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely looking for, if I can't kill something in 2 activations, then I don't consider it a unit capable of killing that unit.
Yeah. I think the important point to kind of pick up on is I don't aim to wipe it out by the end of the game. I aim to wipe it out very, very early to negate its effect or ignore it. And yeah, it used to be that we would typically suggest something like Tough 12 plus Def 2, probably leaning on ignoring hits. You can't do that in 3.5. There's so much of it. So you have to really critically analyze if it's something you can do or if it's something you can wipe out and you need to wipe out. And it's a very hard question to ask nowadays. It really is.
Yeah. For those of you still watching and have seen our previous videos, you'll often hear about us talking about ignoring Tough 12.
That comes from like a slightly older philosophy now, but effectively it's so hard to kill tough 12 def 2, and most of the time your opponent would only bring 1. It's not worth engaging with. Now, you can't do that if they start to bring 2 or 3 of them. You need to have reasonable solutions to them. But the same rules still apply, right? If your opponent has like a support style unit and they have a tough 12 unit and you've got a deadly 3 gun, sometimes it's better to shoot the deadly 3 gun at the support unit because it reduces them down to doing nothing compared to shooting it at the def 2 tough 6 thing, which might just bounce off, maybe do 3 wounds, but doesn't stop them from doing the thing they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. Well, that rounds it out. It's, again, a long video, but I think that most of the value in that video, from my perspective, comes from that Q&A. So thank you so much, everyone, for all of the questions you put in. That was a lot of fun. I think, well, let us know what you think down in the comments about the whole video. Do you agree with our approach to list building? Do you think we've missed something important? Please do let us know. We always like to hear what you've got to say. And this was our first time trying this Q&A thing out. Did you enjoy? Are you coming to the Discord? Do you want more? Are you not entertained? Let us know. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Dave. He's Harvey. This is Don't Think, Just Charge. See you later.